Necessary Evil of Nathan Miller. Book 2 in the Nightmares Trilogy. Written by Demelza Carlton. Autonarrated by AI Charlotte from Google. 31. Nathan's shouting roused me from my nightmare. I caught the words, "Leave her alone," and I realized the hands gripping my shoulders weren't his. Then the hands were gone and I fell back against the bed. The impact jolted the breath from my lungs. I struggled to bring my head out of the dark nightmare and back to the bright hospital room. I took an inventory as I lay down, trying to orient myself. There's the ceiling light, there's Nathan to my right shouting at someone. On my left was the wash basin, which had 2 bunches of flowers in it, still wrapped in florist paper. I looked further along the bed and saw a worried face I hadn't seen in a long time, a face I never expected to see visiting me in hospital. Jason. Jason said something, his eyes on me, but I couldn't hear him over Nathan's shouting. I didn't expect what happened next, though maybe I should have. Nathan took a swing at Jason and his fist connected with Jason's jaw. Jason's response was to ball up his fists and aim a punch at Nathan. His face, his hands. That's my fucking lead guitarist and vocalist. No. In my head, the dark nightmare I'd been woken from was happening again in this brightly lit room. I shook myself, gritted my teeth and fought not to scream at the pain as I stood up. This would end, or so help me, I would stick them both in a headlock as long as I could stay conscious. Step after agonizing step, I crossed the room and shoved between them. I was so close to Nathan his shirt brushed my back, but I faced Jason. Nathan wouldn't hurt me, but for Jason to lose control like this, who knew what he'd do? Jason's fist stayed up, as if he was going to hurt me, or at least push me out of the way to get to Nathan. "Don't you dare touch me." I don't think I'd ever been this angry with Jason. His hands flew up in surrender as he backed away. His fingers looked intact, his face would bruise, but there was probably no harm done. I kept my glare on him for a few more moments. "I want nothing to do with either of you if you're going to fight like animals," I shouted at Jason. He turned pale, suddenly horrified as he saw his future job prospects, all of our future plans destroyed. Finally, he understood. "Caitlin, careful, you'll tear your stitches," I heard Nathan's voice murmur behind me. I took a deep breath, relaxing the iron control for just a moment, and looked down. He was too late, one of the wounds on my leg was bleeding, so I'd already ripped the stitches. I started to crumple as the pain came flooding in, with the realization that Nathan was behind me, trying to support me. Nathan started this. He had no idea what he almost did. "Get your hands off me," I shouted at Nathan over my shoulder. "No." His voice was a barely audible whisper in my ear. I'd rather fall flat on my face than let him touch me with the hand that threw the first punch. In my fury, I tried to turn on my heel to face Nathan. I wanted to give him an earful too. Yet as I started to shift my weight, pain and dizziness overwhelmed me. Strong arms lifted me as Nathan's voice murmured soothingly in my ear. My eyes tightly closed, I fought to hold on to consciousness, without the use of even my fingernails to claw my way out of the threatening dark. I needed to reassure Jason, to tell him that everything would be okay. I forced my eyes open to find the room still drained of color. "Stay down. Don't get up till the colors come back or you'll pass out." "Jason." I fought to get the words out. Something else scared me and I was just shocked to be woken up. I stretched out my hand to him, trying and failing to wiggle my fingers as a silent reminder of what he'd risked. Too late did I realize that else I was showing him. He stared at my bandaged hand and the fingers I couldn't move, let alone play with. "Oh my God, what did they do to you? Dreams, career plans gone." I could see it in his eyes. He bolted before I could say anything. I called after him but he didn't stop, nor return. He didn't let me tell him that I would be okay, that I'd recover and everything would go back to normal. What if they had taken everything from me, even my music? What if my hands were so badly damaged they wouldn't heal? I could feel my eyes filling with tears and forced myself to think of other things. No need for self-pity. Why was he here when I knew he threw up at the sight of blood? Why were there flowers in the sink? I didn't realize the answer until Nathan stood at my side again, holding the larger bunch of flowers as a peace offering in front of him. "Happy birthday," he said apologetically. Today I was legally old enough to drink, and the only alcohol I'd see was some form of disinfectant. I wondered if you could drink the alcohol hand wash. I buried my face in my pillow, laughing hysterically till I cried. A normal girl would have just cried, but I was no longer normal by any stretch of the imagination. 32. Mike Simon knife fighting. No. She can't have a knife. Chris searched her. Mike's voice said from the doorway. He moved into the darkness, toward me. Stay away from me. I insisted, waving the tiny blade. A torch beam blinded my eyes, gleaming on the knife. She has a knife, the smaller man shrieked, pointing. I'll kill him, Mike swore, striding over to me. I brandished the knife, lifting it toward his eyes. Either of you touch me again and I'll cut your fucking dick off. I didn't see the blow that crashed into the side of my face, sending me flying. I hit the concrete blindingly hard and heard the knife skitter away from me. I'll do what I fucking well like, Mike answered. I couldn't see. My face ached and my eyes blurred with tears. I wondered if my jaw was broken. I heard the scrape of metal on stone. There, got it, Mike said. A hand closed around my throat. I could see the knife wavering above my face. Where did you get this, little bitch? I had it in my pocket, I spat. I've got a bigger one for killing you in the other pocket. Don't need a big knife to cut off your prick. Mike threw me back down on the floor. She's all yours. What about this cut? And her other knife? I'm not staying here with that hellcat, getting infected or maybe bleeding to death. I'm not touching her again unless you make sure she can't do it again. And a bodyguard to hold her down too. Somewhere under the pain, I felt grim satisfaction that I'd scared the shit out of the idiot I'd stabbed. He deserved it. Fine. You come with me and we'll see if there's a first aid kit up at the house. A kick connected with my shin. You stay here, little bitch. Chris is in deep shit. If she doesn't kill him, I will. 33. Today we'll take the dressings off your hands. Your fingers should have almost healed up by now. Judith's expression turned from sweet to sour as she shifted her focus from me to Nathan. You out. Nathan stood up slowly. The question in his eyes was directed at me, not her. Other than that, his face was impassive. What if my hands were permanently damaged or twisted? I couldn't face that alone. I lifted my chin. No, I said quietly. I want Nathan to stay. I caught the fleeting smile on his face as he sat down again, but it was gone so quickly I don't know if the nurse saw it. If she did, she probably ignored it. Nathan stretched an arm across the pillow behind me, as if to exaggerate how little concern he had for what the nurse thought. I wished I was as confident as he was. I leaned back on the pillows so his arm was against my back, hoping I could absorb some of his assurance to blot out my fear. I felt his arm stiffen at the contact and realized his relaxed stance was more brittle than it seemed. Instead of worrying me, somehow I found it reassuring, sinking deeper into the pillows. He responded by curling his right hand lightly around my shoulder, giving it the slightest squeeze. We're not scared. Just nervous as all hell, I thought. I swallowed and bit the proverbial bullet. Do it, I told the nurse as I gave a sharp nod. I held out my hand, trying hard not to flinch as she touched me. I forced myself to hold still until she let go of my freshly freed fingers. I held them up, trying to work out if all of them had healed properly. Judith's slight smile told me she saw the same straight fingers that I did, but that wasn't the only thing that mattered. Okay, let's see how well you can move these. Just bend them one at a time, she said, looking serious once more. I was afraid it would hurt. I bent my littlest finger slowly, waiting for the shock of pain to tell me I'd pushed even the tiniest part of my damaged body too far. My nail touched my palm and I almost whimpered in relief. The nurse nodded eagerly as I tried my other fingers, thumb, index finger, middle ring, before my little finger again. The first two were fine, so I curled my middle finger with more confidence than the others. The protesting muscles cramped and I bit back a cry of pain. I was more careful after that, but I needn't have worried. Judith made a cautious comment about how well my hands had recovered so far and how I could make do without full use of my hands if I had to. I looked at her in disbelief. She knew as well as I did that her spiel was silly, a hospital requirement to state risks just in case there was some adverse issue arising from my injuries. I bent all my perfect fingers, leaving only the middle one erect, my reaction to getting a standard statement from her when we both knew better. She tried not to laugh, but I wasn't similarly restrained. I'll be fine. You'll see. She muttered something about arrogant doctors, as I continued to laugh and offered her my other hand. I played the fingers of my right hand out on the sheet, to the rhythm of the cheery little tune in my head. I didn't know where it had come from, but it wasn't going away. Necessary evil, joy and pain. Idly I played with words as the silent notes rang in my ears. I wanted my left hand free so I could work a bass line beneath the melody. Something dark to contrast properly. And the other hand? Judith asked as if she'd read my mind. I curled my left hand into a fist before splaying my fingers out. I wanted to play. I stretched both hands again, as if I was going to play the piano for the first time in 2 months. Some stiffness, but better than nothing. I looked up to find both Judith and Nathan looking at me expectantly. Physio with finger exercises next. Won't that be fun? My hands ached to be on a piano keyboard, but I'd have to wait till I got home. Then, music would be recommended physiotherapy several times a day. My heart flew in hope. I wanted to play and write and start something new. Judith touched a wet cloth to my hands and I let her wipe them clean, my mind spinning with a song that I was struggling not to sing. She looked amused. Do you want me to go see if I can get some bubbly from the kitchen? It was a standing joke that there was no alcohol in the hospital when most of the doctors drank like dried out fish, so I responded like a normal patient who didn't know. I don't believe there's any alcohol for drinking in a hospital. Judith glanced at Nathan and winked at me. There is, for the candlelight dinners in the maternity ward. I'll go get you some and you can toast having your hands back. She hurried out before I could say anything. She was talking about the sparkling grape juice. Surely, they didn't give out alcohol in the maternity ward. I hoped for better though. There was wine for the doctor's functions in the kitchen all the time. My first legal drink to celebrate having my hands back. I could have danced if I could have stood up long enough to do so. Congratulations, Nathan said, pulling his arm away from me as he sat up properly. I looked at him, unable to wipe the smile from my face as I held out my healing hands. My ragged nails could do with a manicure, but I'd have to cut them short to play anyway. I wondered if I should ask Judith for a nail file when she came back. To my surprise, Nathan carefully took my hands in his, startling me out of my skittering thoughts. He kissed the back of my right hand, then my left. Even his light touch felt strange on my skin, hypersensitized from being covered for so long. With an effort, I chose not to pull away. What was that for? He looked surprised. I'm not sure. It just seemed like the right thing to do. He let go of me and looked away. 34. Sick of looking out of the window at the garden below, I announced my intention of going outside. I wanted to sit in the sun, if just for a few minutes. Nathan made as many excuses as he could for why I shouldn't. Eventually I tuned out as I realized I could go outside without him. Now my hands were free, I could push a wheelchair, even if I couldn't walk far yet without it. The surgeon's dark blue pajama set I'd been loaned was still tucked into my bedside cabinet, where I'd left it after the trip downstairs to the coffee shop. I'd never appreciated how easily they slipped on before, with no zips or buttons to complicate matters. I tried to pull the hospital gown over my head, but it got stuck and I realized I'd have to untie it at the back first. As I dropped it to start on the ties holding it closed, I caught Nathan staring at me wistfully, and I realized I'd just given him an eyeful. For the first time in my life I was glad my boobs weren't all that big. Maybe he hadn't seen much. Trusting him to have the courtesy to turn his back or look away, I kept getting changed. My fingers were clumsy as I undid the knots, but I wasn't going to ask him for help. I glanced at him again and his eyes were still on me, as if he were mesmerized. He was probably hoping I'd flash my boobs again, I thought sulfurously, clamping my mouth shut so I didn't shout at him, no matter how much I felt like it. Self-consciously, I tried to keep the hospital gown covering as much as possible as I slipped on the dark blue top, followed by the pants. When I thought I'd be able to keep my temper, I gritted my teeth as I tried to stay civil to Mr. Sleazy roommate. You could have averted your eyes. It's considered polite. He told me he'd been waiting for me to ask for help. I never ask for help. I definitely wasn't asking him. I paused to make up my mind. I was going downstairs into the garden by myself. Fuck you, you sleazy bastard. The wheelchair was outside my room. It was a little further than I'd walked in my physio sessions so far, but if I held onto the wall, the doorframe and possibly the table on wheels, I knew I could reach it. I stood up carefully and put my hands on the table that still held my lunch tray. I took a step and found I had to lean on the table more than I'd expected. This hurt my hands, so I let go of the table. Right, I guess it'd be the hard way. I edged my foot forward, gritting my teeth as I lifted my head to focus on my goal. Instead, Nathan's chest blocked my view as his body barred my way. I glared up at him, but he didn't move. I could feel my control wavering. I opened my mouth to tell him to get out of my way and the haze of pain descended, turning the world grey and threatening to take my consciousness with it. Get out of my fucking way. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I'd walk with my eyes closed if I had to. Before I could take another step, Nathan lifted me off my feet. When he put me down, it was on the edge of the bed, I knew, from the feel of the cotton sheets on the firm mattress. You bastard, you're going to make me take those painful steps again, taking me back to where I started. In my fury, I wasn't game to open my mouth. I just sat there, fuming and ignoring him, as I waited for the pain to ebb, so I could try again. He sat on the floor in front of me, ducking his head until his face was about level with my feet as he looked up at me. The perfect level to kick him if he tried to stop me again, I thought. I was going to break his fucking nose with my foot. If you don't recover, they win. His words surprised me. If he'd get out of my way and let me try to walk, I'd have a better chance at recovery than staying in bed all day. I'm getting better, I told him, stating the obvious that he apparently hadn't seen. His tone was melting, barely more than a whisper. If you let me help you, you'll get better faster. And it won't hurt as much, either. I shook myself. I'd get better faster if I tried to get back to normal as quickly as I could. I'm not asking for your help, I snapped. I voiced my suspicions. You know I won't. Who helped you before, Caitlin? Who brought you food, water, medicine? Someone helped you survive. He looked up at me urgently. Do you remember? Said his eyes. Of course. Don't you? Are you sure you want me to remember Chris and what he did? What you did? In surprise and anger, I blurted out the first things that came to my head. Someone who didn't wait for me to ask. Someone kind. Someone I haven't told the police about. Yet. I left the last word unsaid, regretting every word I'd voiced. I waited for him to say something, to ask more questions that I didn't want to answer. I'd said more than I'd intended to already. Lost in thought, I wasn't paying attention when he did speak. Something about how he was going to help me? Enough waiting. I want to go outside, I told him. And how are you going to get there? He asked, amused. Well, first you're going to get out of my fucking way if I have to kick you. I bit back that response. I'm going to get to that wheelchair, take it down in the lift and then outside. What if you fall again? Not bloody likely. Then I'll crawl. How will you push the wheelchair? The bastard was making fun of me. I held out my hands, struggling not to throttle him with them. Just get out of my way. I tried to remember what the gardens outside looked like. I can use my hands a little. It's downhill from the front entrance to the gardens, so that should be easy. How will you get back up the hill to the hospital? He asked. This was the bit I hadn't thought through. I had hoped to ask him to come and get me in an hour or so, but now I'd be damned before I'd ask him for help. I mumbled a response, but he was already laughing at me. I turned away from him, eyeing the wheelchair again as I steeled myself for another attempt. Fighting with him sapped my energy and I'd need it if I was going outside. As if he'd read my mind, he lifted me up again, this time taking me over to the wheelchair. As always, his hands were deft, gentle and courteous. Anything else would be unprofessional, I realized. Shit, when he watched me change earlier, he was probably checking to see how I was healing up. Always he'd tried to help me. If I hadn't seen him flirt with the nurses, would I have thought him any less gallant? Especially with me always in that horrible, skimpy hospital gown. I felt bad that I hadn't trusted him to help me get dressed. Belatedly, I voiced the words I should have said much earlier. Thank you. Experimentally, I bent my fingers around the wheels. I can do this, I told myself with relief. Now don't be a coward and look at him. Nathan stood in the doorway, looking lost and worried. Are you coming? I asked him, trying to cross my fingers for the first time. Sure, he replied. My heart leaped and I realized how relieved I was. He started pushing me down to the lift, telling me about the gardens. When the sunlight kissed my skin, warmer than anything I could remember in weeks, I laughed for joy. I'll never let them win. I didn't want to lose this. 35. Mike Pill's dark fighting Chris clothes. If you don't do it, I'll shoot you here and now, a voice drawled across the room or maybe outside of it. Get her undressed and you know what to do next, don't you? All right, all right. Chris's voice sounded scared and much closer. The creep of fingers on my skin beneath my clothes. I rolled away from him, scrambling to my feet. I tried to ignore the dizziness, back with a vengeance. What the fuck do you think you're doing? I'll break your bloody hand if you touch me without my permission again. I could see him only as a stationary shadow, perhaps 2 meters from me. Between me and the door. Chris's voice was barely audible, but I recognized it all the same. Maybe it was the way it shook, like he was terrified of me. I have to. Like hell you do. The dizziness didn't fade, and my head started to ache unbearably. So did my jaw. I lifted a hand to my face, trying to rub the pain away. Your head still hurts? Concern colored his tone. Yes, I admitted. What's it to you? I have some more pain relief. I heard the rustle and crackle as he pulled the pills out and pressed them from the packet. And water. He leaned over to retrieve the bottle. He held out both to me, his arms stretched like a zombie in the dark. I hesitated. Not because I thought he resembled a zombie. I suspected trickery of a different kind. My biggest worry was that he'd grab me once I was close enough, overpowering me easily as his strength overcame mine. I decided it didn't matter. If he wanted to grab me, I had nowhere to run. The pills and water were worth the risk. Chris hadn't hurt me yet. Carefully, I reached out and took both from him. He made no move to approach closer, though I kept my eyes on him as I swallowed the pills and gulped a little more water. You stay there, I warned him as I backed away with the water. He didn't attempt to stop me. I should have wondered why. Instead, I sat on the edge of the mattress, sipping in silence while he stood between me and the door, a silent sentinel. A standoff. Who would break first? Not me. I had nothing left to lose. Boredom set in and I found myself drifting. My eyes started to close and I swayed. Muzzily, I decided to stretch out on the mattress just for a moment, to deal with the drowsiness while the pain ebbed away. He hadn't hurt me. Wouldn't hurt me. Maybe I could trust. Finally. A hand groped its way up my leg. I kicked out feebly and it let go. I barely had a moment to breathe my relief when cold fingers crept beneath the waistband of my jeans. The scratch of the zip before he started tugging on them, denim sliding down my skin and exposing it to the freezing air. Let go of me, you bastard! I screamed out, struggling. Fear turned me colder still. Couldn't trust anyone. Not even the one who helped me. The hands only tightened their grip, stripping my jeans from me no matter how hard I fought. My body was too sluggish and slow to respond. Did he even notice my poor attempt to struggle? I'm not hurting you. Just let me, he begged. I couldn't believe my ears. You want me to let you rape me? To make it easier for you? I tried desperately to twist away from him, but his grip was unbreakable. I said, let me go, loser. Can't. If I don't do what I'm told, someone else will get hurt. And they'll hurt you too. The sound of him licking his lips. Nervous. Good. We have to get these clothes off you, then I have to. I've got a gun. I froze. I wasn't ready to die yet. I didn't know him, nor what he was capable of doing. Hands slid beneath my shirt once more, pulling the fabric up. I swatted at him with hands so heavy I could barely lift them. Helpless. I couldn't stop him. No, please don't. You don't have to do this, I whimpered. I do. He sounded like he was in pain. I wished he'd go curl up and die of it. A pause as he yanked my t-shirt over my head. I won't hurt you. Relax and it'll be over soon. I smothered a sob and sent my mind somewhere else. Anywhere not here. 36. Are you ready to give press interviews yet? I stared at Nathan. If it was a joke, it sure as hell wasn't funny. He looked apologetic. There's a press crew around waiting for you. I heard them talking. Fuck. Nosy people asking me questions I didn't want to answer. Telling the world what I didn't want to tell anyone, even Nathan. I don't want to, oh hell, not yet. The sun slid behind a cloud, making my mind up. The light seemed so dim by comparison. Then the cloud was gone. Nathan wanted to go back inside. I could see that, but I wanted just a little more sun. After all, we were pretty well hidden, and I said as much to Nathan. Reluctantly, he agreed to stay outside with me, so he could help me back inside when it became necessary. It felt like no time at all before Nathan's voice told me with regret, "Time to go, Angel." He pointed. "Look, they're taking photos of us." With his help, I switched my seat on the bricks beside the pool in a patch of sunlight for the wheelchair. I had to hold on as he whipped it around and started up the hill at a faster speed than I expected. I heard voices shouting behind us and curled up in the wheelchair, praying that Nathan was wrong and they weren't following us. The voices grew louder. "No," I whispered, closing my eyes. I heard the pounding of Nathan's feet on the path paving, feeling the breath of breeze increase as we gained speed. I didn't feel the warmth of the sun anymore, I felt a chill to the depth of my bones. When Nathan lifted me into bed, I could feel his chest heaving through his sweat-soaked shirt. I watched and waited as he poured himself some water, drank it and tried to slow his breathing. Why would any reporter want to interview me? I asked carefully when it looked like he had the breath to talk. When he started throwing around phrases like, "back from the dead" and "Harry Potter," I thought he was joking. If I was in a story, it was most certainly horror, a far cry from children's stories where the main character survived through magic, miracles or some form of paranormal occurrence. Vampires, wizards, mermaids, no, just me. But maybe, just maybe, there was a story to tell. No less fictional than any other really, but who'd want the truth? The rustling of paper brought me back to the present. Nathan proffered a newspaper plastered with my name and my picture. I scanned the first few lines and realized it was the print version of the news I'd heard in the emergency department when I arrived. One day I'll tell this story, I promised myself. I'd sell it to the highest bidder and to hell with the horror. It wouldn't be my problem anymore. I looked at Nathan, considering. Every story needs a hero. Even mine. 37. You've made a remarkable recovery. You take care, I don't want to see you back here unless you're on crack again, Dr. Aiden said with a smile. Me too, I admitted as I watched him sign my discharge papers. He'd already arranged more meds through the hospital pharmacy, one of the staff was sending them up now. I could go home. Would you like me to drive you home? Nathan asked the moment the doctor left. I hesitated for an instant before I nodded. I trusted him so far, a short car trip was hardly a risk. A nurse whisked me downstairs, Nathan and a guard following behind. The nameless guard did his best not to make eye contact with me, even as I gave him a beaming smile. Nathan wasn't the only man I owed gratitude for keeping me safe in hospital. Nathan wanted me to sit in one of the seats inside the foyer while he brought the car around, but I wouldn't do it. The outside bench looked far too inviting. I'd been cooped up inside for too long and the perfect day begged to be enjoyed. He exchanged a glance with the guard before he headed off into the car park. As he passed the doctor's car park, I smothered a laugh at the sight of Dr. Aiden's red Mini. It looked silly between the huge four-wheel drives and flashy sports cars, but he refused to drive anything else. Idly, I wondered what it was like to drive. Now I was 18, Dad would permit me to buy my own car instead of borrowing his, and I'd barely considered what I wanted. The guard sauntered into view, headed for the car park. He wouldn't have left unless Nathan was back, so I looked around for him. Déjà vu. A red Mercedes pulled up in front of me. The first time I should have run. Now I could barely walk, but I knew what I had to do. I had to get back inside. I wouldn't let them take me back. I'd die first. When I saw Nathan get out of the car, I almost cried. I won't get into their car again. I won't, I swore. Not you. You can't take me back there to them. I insisted. He stared at the car as if he didn't remember. Slowly he told me that the car belonged to him. My fear spiraled out of control. No, I trusted you. Had I trusted the wrong man? Nathan backed away from me, his hands up in some sort of surrender. I glanced over my shoulder and saw 2 hospital security guards watching us intently. I'd never been so relieved. Nathan asked me to sit down again on the bench, not in his scary car, and I did. He started to explain how he owned a red Mercedes. When his voice faded into silence, I kept my voice steady, reminding him of what he already knew, as I fixed my eyes on his shiny mag wheels. They had a car just like this one. They pulled me into it and drove me there, and Nathan wouldn't be so stupid as to kidnap me again in broad daylight, under the eyes of security guards who had a clear view of both his car and the number plate. He'd take me home or the police would hunt him down. I was being suspicious and silly. He'd sworn to protect me. Of course he wouldn't hurt me. I laughed at my own silliness. But you, I began, not sure how to finish. I shook my head. Swear you don't work for them. No, Nathan said. My mind whirled. No, he wouldn't swear to it, or no, he didn't work for them? Hoping I hadn't missed anything important, I tried to pay attention as he continued. One of them decided to try and kill me on that beach where I found you. No one tried to kill him on the beach. They tried to kill me. The police officer tried to shoot him on the road. Didn't he remember, or was he trying to cover up the truth? Would you still like a lift home? Nathan held out his hand. Again, I hesitated. I glanced back at the staring security guards, and made a decision. I'd get into his car, but not willingly. He'd have to carry me in, which meant the security guards would be suspicious. Just in case. Nathan believed in my weakness and lifted me into his horrible car without a qualm. Still, I worried. At least I was in the passenger seat and not child-locked into the back with saucer eyes. I watched Nathan key my address into his GPS, not saying a word. I knew I hadn't told him where I lived, but he was too flustered to notice his slip. When his eyes strayed to me again, I carefully looked out the window instead. I wondered what waited for me at home. If he was so familiar with my address, did that mean his colleagues had searched it thoroughly? Had they planted some form of surveillance in there, to keep watch on my house? Why had he bought me new clothes from a supermarket, instead of sending someone to my place for mine? Or did he truly not want me to know who he worked for? My head was a mess and Nathan wasn't helping. Tears of frustration sprang to my eyes. I didn't understand him at all. Nathan wiped the first tear away and I looked up at him in surprise. His fingers closed over mine, but I didn't drop my gaze to look. Caitlin, it's over. They can't touch you anymore. I'd never seen him look so intense. Or are you upset that I was checking you out? Of all the ridiculous things to say to break the serious mood. I burst out laughing. Nathan checking out my damaged body? He wouldn't hurt me. He wouldn't even touch me. I was going to be fine. Please, can you take me home now? I asked aloud. Sure, Angel, he murmured, starting the engine. It seemed like no time before he said, You're home. I looked out the window and realized he was right. I was home and it hadn't changed at all, the opposite to me. I thanked Nathan as he helped me from the car and into the house. I told him where we kept the spare key and watched as he dug it out. I stepped inside, following Nathan's gaze to see where the surveillance cameras were. On the burglar alarm sensors. That meant the bathrooms, toilet and bedrooms had no cameras, just the living areas. He turned his eyes to the floor. Before I could ask why, he said abruptly, You can use my sister's laptop for as long as you need to. I nodded, thinking of how much I'd have to add to the vague descriptions of my memories. More than Nathan should ever see. Yet I didn't want to say goodbye to him yet. He'd been so kind in driving me home, despite my unfounded fears and my dislike for his car. "Did you want to have dinner here, or do you have something planned at home?" I offered uncertainly. I had no idea what to offer him for dinner. I didn't even know if we had food in the house, with Dad gone for so long. I'd have to ask him to order and pay for pizza. I laughed at my own stupidity. As if he'd read my mind and didn't like the pizza box he saw there, Nathan said, "You should probably have a rest, maybe even a couple of hours sleep, and I'd stop you from doing that if I stayed. I'll leave you to it. Here's my phone number. If you need me at any time, feel free to call." He took a moment to pull a receipt out of his wallet, looking around for a pen. I grabbed one from the hall table and held it out. He smiled his thanks as he scribbled his number on the receipt. I read the numbers over his shoulder. The landline looked like a South Perth one, not far from here, I guessed. "How about I see myself out?" Nathan's words startled me. Hastily, I smiled and agreed. Maybe he was the one on surveillance. I hoped he was the one watching me through the cameras. Better than a stranger. He walked slowly out, offering to return tomorrow. I grasped at the straw. I didn't want to be alone. "Thank you, yes. That'd be wonderful." I wished I had the temerity to demand he stay with me now, but he seemed jumpy somehow. Maybe he wanted to go home and check on his sister. Surely she had surveillance in her house too. I forced myself to close the door behind Nathan, before I hurried to the lounge room window to watch him drive off, my hand pressed against the net curtains and glass as if I could bring him back if I reached out far enough. "Nathan, please don't go." Yet he did, pulling smoothly out of my driveway and driving away. It felt like he'd taken my heart with him. Lost somehow. How strange. 38. Mike hired dark fighting Chris clothes. He took my clothes. All of them. Cold and clinical, as if it was surgery. He bundled them up and took them to the door while I shivered. I heard his voice as a low hum in the distance. "You got all of them? Fuck, have fun with her. Mind if I wank while I watch?" Mark's voice said. My heart froze as I felt cold fingers on my skin again. The mattress moved as his weight crushed it, close to crushing me. And worse. "No," I whimpered. "Please?" Never had unzipping sounded so loud. To me, it was louder than the scream I tried and failed to summon from my own lungs. His panting drowned out even my breathing. I didn't want to breathe if it meant the pain that would come next. "Please," I whispered. Laughter from further away. "Come on, fuck her. She's begging for it. Just shove it in. I'll do it if you won't. She looks real uptight." "No." His shout echoed through the room, telling me it was bigger than I thought. He swallowed noisily as he pulled his hands away from me. "I can't." "You sure about that?" the big bastard asked, an edge to his tone. "I can't. Not with you watching," Chris said finally. He stood up and moved toward the other bastard. I struggled to sit up, moving into a clumsy crouch. Performance issue, huh? Why am I not surprised? The rustle of fabric. "I'll take her clothes then. Anything else you need? A dildo maybe, if you can't get it up." Where to go? The door was out, with two of them there. My next best option was to try and hide in the darkest corner I could find. I moved into the darkness. Chris sounded upset. "Good. Two-faced prick. No. Just no audience." The bastard snorted. "Wish it was my turn." "Ah, she'll keep." The door slammed shut. Shuffling footsteps on concrete, fading away. One down. 1 to go. Oh shit. Angel? He'd discovered I wasn't where he'd left me. I stayed silent and tried to move deeper into the dark, away from him. My back touched the concrete wall, cold and rough against my bare skin. I edged along it, trying not to make a sound. I backed into a corner, almost screaming as soft, sticky cobwebs clung to my skin. What if the spiders were still home? I bit down on my lips to keep the scream inside. A deadly spider bite was preferable to what he had in store. Come on, Angel. It's dark and it's cold, you have no clothes and you'll freeze. I'm not going to hurt you, he pleaded. He clicked on a torch and started sweeping it around the room. Knowing he'd find me soon enough, I spat, No, you just took my clothes and you want to rape me. Like that won't hurt. Fuck you. The words came out thickly, like I was drunk. His voice was anxious. Look, I'm just doing what I'm told. So you're going to rape me because you were told to? Big bloody hero. My voice was flat. I edged around the wall, hoping to find another way out. A corner gave way to an alcove and I backed into deeper darkness, where I couldn't see him, only the light from his torch beam. I grazed my foot on a brick, searing pain spreading as it scraped away skin. I didn't make a sound. No. I swear I won't touch you again. They want me to, but I can't do it. Come on, I know you're not feeling well. His torch beam played across the edge of my alcove, then approached along the floor. The light touched my toes and moved away quickly. Here. The torch clinked to the floor, casting weird shadows as it shone up his body. He started to pull his sweater over his head. I caught a glimpse of the ripple of muscle beneath. Now or never. I reached down and grabbed the brick, sprinting toward him. With his head covered, he wouldn't see me coming. I brought the brick down on his torch, smashing the glass and the globe inside. Light died. I brought the brick up to hit him with it next. What the hell? He flailed around and sent me sprawling before I could clock him with the brick. I scrambled to my feet, stumbling for the door. My fingers touched wood and I felt around for the handle. There wasn't one. I shoved at the door, kicking at the lock, but nothing happened. I remembered this door opened into the room, kicking wouldn't help. I sank to the floor, dizzy. His voice was alarmingly close. Here. Something soft touched my face. Not fingers. Fabric. In the dim light, I could barely make him out as a dark shadow looming over me. I was too tired. He was going to win. My only hope now was that he'd knock me out and I wouldn't feel him hurt me. Just fucking get it over with, I panted. I was close to passing out. Here. Take my jumper. You must be freezing. I give up. You win. I slid down the wall. The concrete under my head was cold, but I was drifting out of consciousness anyway. I barely felt it. No, Angel. I can't win. I've lost too much already. Don't you ever give up. Keep fighting. Don't let them win. His hands touched me again. I couldn't move to resist them anymore. Darkness descended. 39. I sank onto a stool by the phone and pulled out the phone book. I had a lot of cards to cancel and new ones to request. An hour later, sick of spelling out my name and telling everyone my birth date, I left the kitchen and headed for the pathetic collection of belongings I'd brought home with me from hospital. I pulled the laptop bag onto my shoulder and carried it to my bedroom, looking for the camera on the hall sensor. Once I'd spotted it, I felt a little safer. At least someone was watching out for me, somewhere. I hoped they were close by, close enough to come if I needed them. Unzipping the bag, I lifted the pink pewter out and started to connect the power cables. I didn't flick the switch on the Wi-Fi modem. I didn't want to check my emails, Facebook, and all the rest. Answering all the panicked questions would take me ages, and I just wanted to focus on the worst things first. Joe had told me about the Facebook tribute page, Rip Caitlin, that some idiot had set up. Almost but not yet asshole, I thought. I wasn't dead yet. I had too much to do. A little justice was in order. I watched the machine power up, tears springing to my eyes as I saw a photo of Alana and Nathan on the desktop. They looked like they were on a boat at Rottnest, and they both looked so happy. I'd never seen him smile like that. Perhaps a part of him really had died with her. She'd been so vibrant. But not stupid. She told me to watch out for him. Had she seen danger when it came for her? I shook the thought from my head. I knew now what they'd done to her more clearly than anyone else could, for I bore the same injuries. I'd lived to tell the tale it was time to tell. The file was saved directly on the desktop, neatly called Nightmares of Caitlin Lockyer. Like the title of a horror novel, I thought. I'd never liked horror stories, but I opened this one. I skimmed through what I'd already told Nathan in the vaguest terms. The most brutal of rapes reduced to 30 words? No, 29. I could reduce the whole thing to just 4 if I really thought about it. It hurt. Never again. But brevity wasn't called for now. Brutal detail, so I could find them. Hunt them down. Somehow make them pay for what they'd done to me. Like Alana, I probably should have died. But I didn't. I was on borrowed time. Borrowed for vengeance, for I had no life left as long as they had theirs. I'd never be free until they were all dead. I carefully stretched my fingers and started to type. Chris. The car. The stolen kiss. How he took my clothes. The horror of the first rape. And another. The cruelty of cuts, breaks, bruises, and other brutality. The horror of help not given, however desperately begged for. Bloody breakfast cereal that I'd never eat again, no matter how hungry. And the beach, darkness, freedom, stars, blood and gunshots, almost losing everything. As I reached the bit where my fingers were broken, I stopped, the tears too much. Now I wanted a hug from Nathan, a promise of cake and comfort. I toyed with calling him, but I didn't. After all, I didn't need him, I just felt a little lost and lonely. Hardly an emergency. I read through the harrowing account of how Pete, and couldn't do it anymore. As the sky turned mauve, I sat back, looking at the horrible text with some satisfaction. I'd done enough for one day. I hit save. My stomach rumbled to remind me that I had other concerns than catching criminals. I closed the lid of the laptop and rose, heading for the kitchen. I opened the fridge first, out of sheer force of habit. The smell that assaulted me was like nothing on earth I'd ever smelled before. I grabbed the orange juice and slammed it shut quickly. The juice bottle was the only item that hadn't been furry. I set the bottle on the sink and found a glass. Barbara had kept our house immaculately clean, as always. Having a cleaning lady like her was a luxury I hoped would continue for a long time. I uncapped the juice bottle and started to pour. Nothing came out. I set the bottle on the bench, checking to see if the seal was still on it. It wasn't. I tipped the bottle over the glass again. A little liquid started trickling into the glass, followed by an enormous blob of goo that splashed over the glass and the draining board in a spectacular orange ink blot. What does this remind you of? I could almost hear the hospital psychologist's coaxing voice. I inclined my head, looking closely. It reminds me that I've been away for a long time and I need to go food shopping. It reminds me not to drink the orange juice. I capped the bottle and dropped it into the bin. As if the clink of the bottle hitting the bin bottom was some kind of cue, I heard knocking. 40. The knocking continued as I made my way to the front door. Jagged Amber from across the road stood on my doorstep, her dark eyes worried. "Caitlin, we were all so worried about you, and the newspapers kept saying you would not return alive." I smiled. "You know me, Jagger. I'm too tough to kill." "What happened to you?" she asked. I sighed. More than any girl should have to put up with. She smelled of spices, the sort that set my hungry stomach off again. "Oh, don't you worry. You'll be back into life in no time." "I know you," she said fiercely. She dropped her voice. "Would you like some biryani? I made extra when I saw you arrive home, because I thought you'd have nothing in the house and no time to cook." She held up a covered dish and the spicy smell intensified. I think I drooled a little. I covered my mouth with my hand. "That would be amazing, thanks, Jagger." I took the warm dish from her hands, cradling it in my arms like a baby. "If there's anything you need, you just call us," she said. "I'll send my husband over if you get any more men visiting, who shouldn't be here." I smiled tiredly. "It's okay. The men before were putting in a new security system." I hoped it was true. Surveillance cameras were a sort of security system after all. We both said goodbye and she crossed the road to return home. I carried my dinner into the kitchen and set it on the bench. Lifting the lid, I inhaled the spicy smell of the still warm curry. I was ready to eat it all on the spot. Forcing myself to wait, I stuck some rice and water in the rice cooker and turned it on. While I waited for the rice to cook, I stretched out on the lounge room floor and started doing the exercises Althea had given me. I did 2 sets of everything, then started on the 3rd before the timer beeped. I clambered to my feet, feeling the burn of exhaustion in my thighs as I stood. I took a deep breath and forced myself to walk normally, despite the pain. I could ignore it. I'd ignored worse pain before, and no amount of limping would make those bastards pity me if they turned up here. Or her. If I wanted to kill her and all the rest of them, I needed my strength. I served up the biryani and rice, spooning a much larger serving than I normally would. I'd need the energy to do more exercises after dinner. I ate the lot, though I felt bloated afterwards as I washed the dishes. I stuck the rice in the dish Jagger had given me, and opened the fridge without thinking. The smell hit me again, just as bad as before. I took a moment to see if I could remove the sauce, but my fridge looked like something out of a horror movie. Something had gone moldy in the crisper and the mold had spread from shelf to shelf while I'd been away. It looked like I'd been dissecting calico cats and kept the body parts in my fridge. I shut the door again, without leaving the dish in there. I popped it in the freezer instead, which bore no fur, just a thin crust of frost. I headed back to the lounge room, dropping to the floor to repeat my physio exercises until I ran out of strength. I couldn't recover fast enough. After an hour, a sheen of sweat made my clothes stick to my skin. My legs were protesting in pain even as I lay on the floor. I decided to try taking a shower. I managed to stagger to the bathroom, only to collapse in a heap on the bathmat. There was no way I could stand long enough for a shower. Hauling myself up on the side of the bath, I filled the tub instead and crawled laboriously in. I wanted to sink beneath the bubbles and sleep, but I had my own bed for that, a bed I was definitely looking forward to, after weeks of cold concrete followed by a slightly softer hospital bed. I drained the tub and crept over to the cupboard for a towel to dry myself with. I was so exhausted I knew as soon as I reached my bed I'd fall in and sleep. I wouldn't want to come back to hang my towel up. I hesitated for a moment, before remembering that Nathan would be monitoring the surveillance cameras. He'd seen me naked only this morning. Taking a deep breath, I tried to walk nonchalantly down the hall to my bedroom. I closed my bedroom door and pulled on a nightie, before palming the light switch and falling into bed. The soft mattress cuddled me as the quilt enveloped me in what I can only describe as heaven. Home. 41. Forgiveness. Superman. Chris. Clothes. I jerked awake. Beneath me was the mattress, not concrete. Back where I started. What did you do to me? I demanded, my voice hoarse. I could barely move my legs. His voice came from over by the door. I could just make out a shadow crouched by the wall. I gave you my jumper. I moved you to the mattress so you'd be more comfortable. I wrapped you in a blanket so you'd be warm. And I took the other blanket for myself because it's freezing in here and you're wearing my jumper. He sounded pleading. Like he wanted my forgiveness or something. He wasn't going to get it. I could feel the fleece on my skin and the scratchy blanket wrapped around my legs, restricting my movement. And how many times did you rape me while I was unconscious? I spat angrily. None? His quiet response shocked me, especially as it sounded like he was telling the truth. And I'm not going to. Save your strength. You don't need to fight me. I'm trying to help you. Helping me is getting me out of here. Not stealing my clothes, I pointed out. No, and I'm sorry. I gave you mine though. If you don't want it, I'll trade you my blanket for my Superman jumper back. I forced myself to laugh. Superman? You think you're Superman? I wouldn't ask you for help, even if you were Superman. Hell, that's what I need. A real superhero to beat the crap out of all these bastards, including you, and get me the hell out of here. I'll keep your damn sweater. There are no superheroes, here or anywhere. All you have is me. You're a pretty poor excuse for my last hope. Yet I'll work with what I have to try to get out. He continued, rest while you can. While I'm here, the others won't touch you. I hesitated, but I had to ask. Why not? He sounded like it pained him to say it. Because they think it's my turn to hurt you. 42. I woke myself with my own scream. Tom had hit me. He'd broken my fingers. And then I bit back another scream, trying to slow my breathing and my heart rate. I was on a comfortable bed, not there. I groped for the bedside table, hoping I had a bedside lamp. I couldn't remember anymore, it had been so long since I'd slept in my own bed. My fingers felt the tingle of the touch lamp as the globe lit up, and died. Swaying, I slid out of bed and tried to find the light switch. I barely managed to get to the door on my shaky legs, swatting at the switch until it turned on and I could sink to the floor. I hugged my knees to my chest, feeling very alone. I wanted Nathan. I wanted to feel his arms around me. I wanted to hear him tell me that I was safe. I thought about calling him, but my clock told me it was almost midnight. Who would watch the surveillance cameras if he was here, soothing me to sleep like a big baby? I forced myself to stand and walk over to the desk, my muscles screaming in protest until I sank onto the desk chair. I powered up Alana's laptop and promptly typed in everything I could remember of my nightmare about Tom, sparing no detail. I got to the worst part and stopped. No one needed to know how it felt when they raped me. It's no one's damn business. All they needed to know was that it happened. And all of them did it. Quickly I typed in the 4 bastards' names. I started to fill in sketchy details of what I remembered about each of them. It was nearing 2 in the morning by the time I'd finished, but I didn't dare stop until it was done. Feeling a bit better, I lay down again, deciding to leave the light on. I felt a little afraid of the dark. I fell asleep and woke screaming. Tom had raped me again in my sleep and I couldn't. I stumbled out of bed and down the hall. Nothing calmed me like music. Nothing. With shaking hands, I lifted the lid on the piano. It was time for more exercise. The best kind. I touched my fingers lightly to the keys, praying it wouldn't hurt too much. I needed to hear music, mine, no one else's. I tried. I really tried. But my fingers were stiff and my playing was stiffer still. As the sun rose, I played scales. Up and down my piano, limbering my fingers up until they worked again. Yet with every scale, a tune kept creeping into my head. I wanted to hear it on guitar, but I picked it out in piano notes, just letting the sound color the air around me. Even after hours of scales, my music was still stiff and jerky, but that seemed to suit this piece. A necessary evil, perhaps. Part of the discord in my head. I shook my discordant head and resumed my scales. A tattoo on the door matched the rhythm perfectly, but I knew it meant the person knocking wanted my attention. I staggered to my feet and looked at the stained glass decorating my front door, glowing in the early morning sunlight. A new day had dawned, yet I hadn't slept. 43. I dragged my feet to the door and managed to unlock it. All that playing made it easier to twist the locks, though it still hurt to stand. I had to lean on the door to rest. I shifted my weight from the wooden door to the screen one, swinging it out to see my visitor better. Stronger hands than mine moved the door as I did, dragging me along with it and partway down the steps. I tried to hang on, but my fingers weren't strong enough. Fortunately, Nathan's arms were. The only reason I didn't fall was because he caught me. What happened? I heard him say. I mumbled something about how I couldn't sleep with the nightmares. How the nightmares wouldn't go away. He lifted me in his arms and told me he was taking me to bed. I wanted to laugh, thinking that such a seduction seemed too sudden, but I contented myself with a smile as I snuggled closer to his chest. I wanted him to comfort me. To stay. I felt the bed beneath me and he tried to pull away. No. Not alone again. Please stay. I reached for him. As sleep washed over me like a warm wave, I heard him say he would. I smiled as I drifted off. In the dark, the bastard took my clothes and I was helpless to stop him. I tried to fight him, but my hands met nothing but air and a pillow. A sweet, soft pillow. I'm home. Safe. Where was Nathan? I'm here, Angel, like I promised. It's okay. He took my hand in his. I could barely believe that he'd stayed. I wanted to kiss him, I was so happy to see him. So silly. He rested his head on the pillow beside me, facing me. Bad dream, he asked. I nodded and he pulled me into a comforting hug. Somehow this seemed more intimate than before. I lay in bed in his arms, safe and secure, and slept. 1. Don't get into cars with strangers. So stupid to think I was strong enough to resist. But I never dreamed it would happen to me. Dashing through traffic in daylight. A tingling instant preceded my sneeze. Desperately scrabbling for a tissue before the explosion. Sneezing, blowing black. I wanted to wash my hands, but there was nowhere on the terrace to do that. I looked up, wondering where I could. My search met her stare through the open window of her Mercedes. I knew my sneeze couldn't inspire such fascination, so I looked behind me. Her laughter dragged my eyes from the ordinary street scene back to her. Apprehensive, I started to walk towards her, because my path lay past her. She stepped out of her car, continuing to stare at me. I tried to look anywhere but at her. She had a nice car, a shiny red Mercedes with even shinier mag wheels, but not the newest model. I'd seen the newest ones in the doctor's car park at the hospital. Yet there was something in the lines of this one. Now that's a nice car, I couldn't stop myself from saying. She smiled and motioned for me to come closer. Her hair was a short, dark bob that shone in the sun, her lips a glistening bright red that matched the car. "My friend wants to ask you something," she said. Cracking open the car's back door, she jerked her head in the direction of the car's interior. I leaned on the door frame and stuck my head inside with considerable curiosity. My eyes took a moment to adjust from the bright sunlight outside to the tinted gloom. There were two guys in there, one in the passenger seat, and another in the back. The one in the back was breathing heavily, like he'd just finished a long sprint, or he was making an obscene call. I could barely see his face, just his eyes. His eyes were on me, wide as saucers. Pervert. I tried to back away, but the bitch behind me didn't let me. She hit my diaphragm with the heel of her hand, forcing my breath out in a huff. Unable to breathe, the street stood still in my mind as I stared around, desperately hoping for someone to see, someone who'd help me. Did eyes meet mine? Did I imagine understanding? If it was, it came too late. The burning flare that was my need to breathe exploded, and she shoved me into the car. I fell on flesh encased in fabric as I gasped for breath, a flailing fish in the pervert's lap as I lay across the back seat. I dimly heard the doors and windows shut. The motor hummed as the car accelerated away, before I had enough air to scream. 2. And now in breaking news, Caitlin Lockyer has been found. In the early hours of this morning, a man discovered her body dumped on a southwest beach. Sources say that she was left on the beach to die, but she was found in time and moved to hospital in Perth, where she remains in a critical condition. A police spokesperson would not confirm whether the girl known as the Absent Angel is alive or dead. "Let me know when you work it out, won't you? I don't feel dead." "Oh, turn that down. She's waking up. Get a dressing over that one and we can make a start on these ulcers." Unfamiliar hands touched me. Unfamiliar voices talked about my injuries as dispassionately as a GPS giving directions. Was it safe to open my eyes? Were they helping me, or did I need to fight my way free? My head felt full of thick fog, so the thoughts were slow to surface. Pain made the decision for me, twin pains. A sharp pull on my hair as someone tore the skin from my back. I cried out, so I didn't hear what the low voices murmured. Cold metal touched the side of my neck. Going to cut me again. Going to hurt worse. No. I shouted, or tried to. My voice rasped in my throat. I couldn't feel my hands, but I still tried to use them to push myself upright. The moment I put weight on them, feeling returned. Pain shot up every one of my fingers, through my wrists and up my arms, like electrodes attached to every nerve. My scream sounded squeaky and weak, which is why I heard the snip of the scissors. I opened my eyes to see bright light, briefly blocked by what was unmistakably my hair. The scissors cut my hair, I realized. Taking everything away from me, even my hair. Bastards. You promised. I sobbed out. You promised you wouldn't let them hurt me again. Please come back. He was shot. You saw the blood. If he wasn't here, was he even alive? Did they kill him? I shook my head, trying not to see the picture in my memory, his shock at the spreading patch of red on his shirt, over his chest. I focused on the grinning pictures on the ceiling above me. Winnie the Pooh, Eeyore, Mickey Mouse, Minnie Mouse. Eeyore I liked. He looked sympathetic. I wanted to scream at the rest of them or scratch their eyes out. Stop grinning at me like my pain is funny. A concerned face came into view. She's awake. Honey, can you hear me? Yes, I told her impatiently. Where is he? Who, honey? They can't hurt you anymore, she said soothingly. Dropping her voice lower, she murmured, we need to give her more pain relief. This isn't enough. They could hurt me and he'd promised to protect me. But he couldn't if he was dead, and I couldn't sleep until I knew where he was. I didn't even know his name. I ignored the soothing woman, who didn't know what she was on about. Where are you? Please come back. You promised. Carefully I pushed with my elbows and not my hands this time. I struggled to sit up and see where I was. Where he was. Gloved hands weighed on my shoulders, pushing me down. I took a swipe at the hands, growling, "Don't touch me," as I collapsed on the bed again. I turned my head as a shoe squeaked on the vinyl floor. The soothing woman now had a syringe. She was going to give me something that would make me sleep. They'd kill me in my sleep, and I'd never wake up. I struggled to rise, and this time they didn't stop me. Every head was turned away from me, to the door of what I recognized as a hospital room in an emergency department. Hey, the news got something right. I was in hospital. But which one? I heard his voice. I finally saw his face clearly as he pushed past an orderly to enter the room. The face of the man who killed another in an effort to protect me, before the police shot him. Fuck. Focus. Memories could wait. Don't let them hurt me again. I shouted at him as I lunged for the syringe with my uncooperative fingers, before my arms gave out and I was lying flat on the bed again. I couldn't feel if I'd managed to snatch the syringe or just knock it out of her hands. I didn't have the energy to lift my arm to check, either. My eyes didn't leave him. His face looked pale and a bit scared, though he tried to keep his voice calm. He had no shirt on and a white dressing spotted with a little fresh blood, looked like a misplaced breast pocket on his bare chest. He said something about being in hospital, but I didn't catch the words. I'm so tired, but I'm scared to sleep, I told him, my voice starting to give out as my eyes filled with tears. What if, when I wake up, you're gone and I'm still there with them? Please? I didn't know what to ask him for. Please don't be dead? He promised he'd be here again. I could feel my mind going under. Like drowning in a warm bath, only I could still breathe. He promised. Even if he was dead, he was shot trying to help me. Thank you. I tried to say the words, but I wasn't sure if they came out right. Even the ghost of someone killed trying to help me deserved my thanks. Is he a ghost, or is he real? I thought, but was too tired to give voice to it anymore. As a ghost, he couldn't protect me. Directly above me, all I could see was a blurry yellow bear. If this kills me, Winnie the Pooh, I'm taking you and your smug smiling face with me to hell. This last thought followed me down into a spiral of darkness. 3. The sibilance of sound as his voice spoke in endless waves. Sentences ebbed and flowed in the dark, always the same ones with slight variations. Sorry. Caitlin, I'm sorry I didn't help you sooner. Stole a shirt from a corpse. Stuck it on you. Sorry. So sorry. Sorry I didn't. SSSSSAFE. It's okay, Angel, you're safe. Safe in hospital where you belong. You're safe now. They can't hurt you. I'll keep you safe, Caitlin. I swear. Shush, it's okay, you're safe now. SSSSSSHE. She's the same age as you. I couldn't let them. She said she knew who'd killed her. She's all I have left. Please? After a few drinks, she wanted to leave, so we made it to the back seat of my car before she was my twin. She must have spiked my drink. SSSSS's sister. My twin sister. The only sister I have left. Said, are you sure you didn't get the sister instead? We'll call him Chris just in case. Please wake up and help me save my sister. Said it'd remind me of the sister I didn't want them to take. You or her, he said. Do you know what it's like to lose a sister? Should've. I should have tried to help you sooner. Should have known she seemed strange. Should have grabbed you before she did and run. Should have known. SS sorry. Sorry. Caitlin, I'm so sorry. Surfacing to sound, before submerging in darkness once more. Sorry. Slipping, sinking from safety to screaming nightmares. Shit. 4. Mercedes read Chris her Mike sorry pervert. Saucer eyes looked like he was going to cry. I was going to make him cry if he so much as touched me. How see? Shut up, said the one in the passenger seat. Saucer eyes wasn't much older than me. His breathing slowed, but it felt forced, the muscles in his legs tense beneath my back. Thighs as taut as a fully laden clothesline. One hand clutched the door handle, but the door didn't open, no matter how hard he pulled on that handle. His other hand mashed down the window button, which wasn't opening either. Held prisoner by the car's child lock. No one trusts a pervert, not even his peers. He wouldn't look at me as he mumbled something half under his breath that sounded like, sorry, before he turned away to stare out the window. I dragged air in through my nose, inflating my burning lungs like brand new balloons. I wanted to kill the bitch and her 2 blokes too. But first, let me go, you bastard. I blared, feeling satisfaction as Saucer Eye's hands shot up in scared surrender. You can wait, pervert. The big bastard gets his balls ripped off first. Besides, the only way out is through his door if the back doors are child locked shut. The big chunky bastard in the passenger seat just laughed. I tensed, testing each muscle for readiness as I prayed I could do enough damage to make him let me go. I launched my body at him, clawed fingers first, reaching for his face. I wanted to scratch his eyes out, but his fist to my jaw jerked my head up so hard I saw stars as I landed in Saucer Eye's lap, stunned. I sucked in a sobbing breath, not game to give in to the blokes who could kill me. Fight them till I fucking killed them, for I'd never let them win as long as I drew breath. One more breath and I'd be up, ready to rip out an eye. Chunky twisted in his seat, telling Saucer Eyes, Chris, hold her still, but he wouldn't touch me. Still surrendering, Chris was saucer-eyed and shaking, set against a background of the dark car ceiling. Chunky caressed the forming bruise on my face with a satisfied smile, saying, beautiful, before he clamped a cloth over my face, crushing me down onto Saucer Eyes. Chris. I remember gasping for breath, fighting what I knew was sweet, cloying chloroform, but I couldn't. All I could see was Saucer Eye's face, his anguished look as his lips formed the words I couldn't hear, oh God I'm so sorry, before it all vanished in a dark haze. It's all dark after that. 5. The first unfamiliar voice I heard was male. I struggled to focus, but it was like my body was too heavy to move, from my eyelids to my toes. Even the voice sounded like it was far away or a TV with the volume on low. Guards, no one, we need her to stay safe. I heard the unfamiliar voice say. The reply came with words I couldn't hear, but my heart relaxed at the sound. I didn't know his name, but I knew his voice meant safety. The unfamiliar man heard him though, and he responded, get them before the local police do, be her fucking best mate. It's his job to guard me. He's not police, but he's here. He's going to stay and keep me safe. And he has orders to get them before the police do. Shit, not before I get there first. I want to kill them all for what they did to me. Maybe he'll help me, my best mate, all right. They kept talking while my thoughts drifted in the dark. Some of the words penetrated the fog in my head. Let me know what you find out. And don't let anyone fucking kill her. The unfamiliar voice faded, as if he was walking away from me. That's right. Don't let anyone fuck or kill me. Not even in self-defense. Drifting. 6. I heard voices as I floated in the dark, mostly his but sometimes others. Sometimes I could discern a few words, but they seemed too far away to focus on. The only concept I seemed to be able to hold on to was whenever I heard his voice, there was no pain and I thought, it's okay. I'm safe. In between those times I fought them in the dark, over and over again. I couldn't open my eyes to see if any of them, him or them, were real. I was too tired, my eyes too heavy. Or my eyes were open and it was so dark that I couldn't see, just like before. This felt different somehow. It was warmer here. I heard his voice as a wordless hum and relaxed in the sensation of safety it brought. Through the contentment in my head, I heard him clearly say, Alana. That's my name. My middle name, anyway. I struggled to focus on what he said next. Something about his sister. He never stopped fighting, never let them win. So they broke her and they killed her. How could anyone do that to her? How could anyone do that to me? I wanted to hunt them down and hurt them for what they did to her. But the police didn't arrest anyone and they could still do it again, to someone else. Hunt them down and kill them. Then they'll never do it again. I'm sorry, Caitlin. I never wanted to see you hurt. Not like this. I should have helped you sooner. It's not too late. Help me hunt them down and kill them. Then maybe I'll forgive you for what you did. I felt the fury bubble up inside me, but all it did was exhaust me, pushing me deeper into the dark where I couldn't make out what he was saying. 7. Dark Chris Mike awake card. Angry voices in the dark. No, one angry voice, one petulant one. The angry one shouted commands. You're not to talk to her except to give orders or ask questions. Even at a distance, the bastard's voice hurt my pounding head. The petulant one sounded almost whiny. Mike, she'll be scared and not feeling well with the aftereffects of the drugs. I want her lying down. You can want me all you like. Get close to me and I'll kick your balls backwards through your teeth. Of course you do. It's easier to fuck her lying down than standing up. My blood ran cold and I missed whatever the angry prick said next. But she's not a threat, the petulant voice whined. Sure mate, you believe that until I get close enough to bite something off. You don't need to have her tied up like this, he continued. Fucking right you don't. I twisted my wrists within the rope, it was a little loose. Not loose enough to pull out of, but I could still move my hands a bit. The rope didn't restrict my circulation. I shifted, rolling on the concrete like an overturned turtle. I still had my clothes but no shoes. More rope on my ankles. I had to get rid of the rope. I needed to find a sharp edge to cut it, so I could get free. I squirmed, wondering what in hell was in my jeans pocket. It felt like a really thick credit card. Please. I don't think I can, the petulant voice begged. Mike said, sure you can. Nothing to it. She's tied up so she can't escape. You don't need to say a word to her. If you're lucky, she might still be unconscious. You can stick it in and be done before she wakes up to think about fighting you. Easiest lay of your life. I heard the smack of flesh on flesh. Did Mike slap Chris on the back? Or did Chris slap Mike for saying what he did? Shit, who cared? I managed to get 2 fingers into my pocket, almost dislocating my shoulder in the process. Wincing, I pinched the strange card between my fingers. Slowly I edged it out, wishing my hands weren't tied behind my back. I wasn't sure how to bring it to my face so I could see it. I explored the edges with my fingers, trying to work out what it was. I heard something scrape across concrete. What the hell is that for? Mike sneered. It was the Swiss card I'd bought Jason for his birthday. This was in my bag, one of them must have stuck it in my pocket. Someone was trying to help me. In case I get hungry or thirsty. You said she's mine all night. Chris sounded uncertain. Mike laughed. Yeah, you would need a snack to keep your stamina up for more than a minute. Have fun with her. Tell me about it tomorrow. I heard heavy footsteps leaving. I desperately tried to pull a blade out of the card, but I couldn't seem to find one. Oh shit, oh shit. 8. Strange hands touch me again. This didn't hurt yet, but I called for him in panic. I heard his voice clearly this time. It's okay, Caitlin. You've been hurt and we're trying to help you get better. A woman's voice closer than his. It must have been her hands on me. You're in hospital as a patient now and all of us on the clinical team here are doing our best to help you get better. She knew me. She knew I wasn't usually a patient in hospital. Your roommate's sleazy and if I were you I'd wake up fast so you can ask for a room transfer. Inwardly I laughed. No matter how sleazy, there was no way I'd give in to anyone's amorous advances for a very long time. Mr. Sleazy roommate would give up long before that. I could smell disinfectant now. Faint, but it was there. They were both quiet, so I heard the crackle of ripping paper and plastic, interspersed with the feeling of tugging on my skin, then something soft being smoothed back over it. Changing my dressings? I was aware of the edge of pain now, as feeling returned to my body. The woman's voice was low and kind. I'll get you some more medicine for the pain. That'll help. Another crackle nearby, but I couldn't feel anything touch me. There, all done. Sleep well. I felt my body fade away until I was just a consciousness in the dark again. Then even that slipped away as I fell asleep once more. 9. Pregnant. Rape? I heard the words and struggled to focus. I could feel my body faintly, so I tried to move my fingers, but it was too much for me yet. The calm voice sighed, sounding sad. If she was awake, I could ask her. But she's a 17-year-old girl who's been through hell and a lot of pain, given how long she was missing and the state she's in now. I found I could hold my breath. A 17-year-old girl who'd been through hell. That was me all right. But pregnant? No. I've left a note in her file and I'm leaving it at that. There's no need to ask her or even mention it. She's definitely not pregnant. I let out my held breath in a sigh of relief, but it was only loud in my ears. Too intent on their own conversation, they didn't hear me. The second voice belonged to a young woman, who sounded very serious. I'd asked Dr. Lannon just to be thorough. What if? I stopped trying to move and stayed as still as I could. Even knowing the man was Dr. Lannon didn't reassure me. I'm not awake. Don't ask me. I don't want to tell you. His normally calm and patient voice sounded irritated, louder than before. Did you see her when she came in? Have you been here when she has nightmares? No, I've just read her file because she was on my patient list today. This girl was beaten and raped repeatedly for weeks, then left on a beach to die. It's been all over the news. Do you want to be the one to remind her and make her relive all the gory details? I could hear footsteps leaving. Her reply sounded further away. No. Their conversation drifted away as they left, my thoughts stirring sluggishly. Beaten. Raped. Left on a beach to die. I remembered pain. I remembered sand. Left to die? No. My death was meant to be sudden and witnessed. Never alone. My body slipped away again. Did that mean they'd given me more pain medication? I struggled to hold on to my thoughts of sand, beach, as I sank into oblivion and what I can only describe as the arms of a nightmare. 10. Dark Chris awake card headache stab free. The door cracked open without a cliched creak. Dim light spilled into the room. Feverishly I kept digging my nails into the card, trying to find something to cut my bonds. I closed my eyes, trying to visualize the card I held. Hey! His voice was barely above a whisper. Are you awake yet? No. I'm busy sleeping, so fuck off, I thought but didn't say. I found the scissors. Trying not to move too much, I dug the blades into the rope. Awake, he said again. He shone a torch into my face. I opened my eyes slowly. My head ached horribly and I couldn't see clearly. He loomed like a blurry shadow above me, between me and my escape. Chris held up his hands, surrendering just like he had in the car. I wondered if he knew what I held in my hands. He shook his head convulsively. I'm not going to hurt you. He sounded like he was begging, but that made no sense. Begging me to believe him, maybe. How are you feeling? I tried to talk but nothing came out. I sawed furiously at the rope. He crouched on the floor near me but not near enough to touch me. Would you like some Panadol for the headache? He sounded kind. Perhaps he could see my panic and mistook it for fear. I remember he waited a moment, like he wanted to say something else, but he seemed to change his mind. He moved from a crouch to his full height, leaving the room as quickly as he'd come. I felt something snap and kept slicing at that rope, desperately trying to free myself before he returned. The rope gave, loosening around my wrists. Carefully, I tried to pull my hand out. Yes. Feverishly, I untied my legs. I tried to find a knife in the card, something, anything I could threaten Chris with to make him let me go. I pulled it out a tiny bit, so I'd be able to find it again when I needed it, and stuck the card back in my pocket. My feet tingled as I wiggled my toes, trying to relieve the numbness. Whoever had tied my feet had done a better job than they had with the restraints around my wrists. Cautiously, I stood up, my toes curling and refusing to cooperate as circulation returned. I tried to take a shuffling step, but the whirling dizziness in my head almost made me fall. I had to get to the door so I could get out. Hide somewhere so I could get between him and the door when he came in. Shut him in here and run. I couldn't see, but I continued to drag my feet across the floor until my outstretched fingers touched the wall. I almost cried as I slumped against it. No. Couldn't cry. No matter how scared, I had to keep it inside if I wanted to escape and live. Couldn't hesitate. You can do this. You can do this, I heard Chris's voice murmur from the other side of the door. You can do what? Rape me? Fuck you. I pulled the card out of my pocket and extracted the knife. The door started to open. Chris had his back to it, shouldering his way into the room, carrying something. He was going to see me as soon as he got the door open far enough. I needed to get the knife to his throat while his hands were full. I straightened up, trying to ignore the blinding pain in my head as I threw myself forward, blade out. I felt it sink in with a strange ease. Not like cutting up meat. Baked potato maybe. Blackness descended. 11. When I was aware of my surroundings again, I found I couldn't hear anything. It was too quiet. I opened my eyes in shock, blinking to make sure I'd really finally opened them. I looked up at a white ceiling with an institutional fluorescent light. The light was dim, leaving shadows on the ceiling, but it felt too bright to me after so much darkness. Focusing on trying to keep my eyes open, I experimented with moving my toes, then my fingers. My toes moved fine, but my fingers felt like they were tangled in the sheet. I could certainly feel them, but they barely moved through the resistance of whatever wrapped them. I tried to lift my arms so that I could see my hands. I managed to bring them into my field of vision, before I tried to move my fingers again. It took me a few moments to realize that the white swathing my hands wasn't a pair of weird white gloves. They'd bandaged my hands and all of my fingers. No wonder I couldn't move them. It occurred to me that I was pretty useless with my hands disabled. I shouldn't be alone. He promised he'd be here. Did that mean they killed him? I called for him, irritated that I didn't know his name. I tried to sit up, but I was afraid to put any weight on my evidently injured hands. Crunches were never my strong point, but this was the first time I'd regretted avoiding them. Everyone should do daily crunches, just in case their hands are disabled and they need those tummy muscles to sit up. I heard his voice nearby and I struggled to focus on his words before I saw his face above me, looking exhausted. He wore a shirt now and he looked fine, as if he'd never been shot. He touched his fingers to mine and I felt the heat of his hand through the bandage before he ripped his hand away as if he'd been burned. I didn't feel burned. I couldn't feel any pain in my hands or anywhere else. Stunned, I tried to process this and came up with two options: either we were both dead and he'd waited for me in the afterlife, or I'd been given so much pain medication I just felt like I was made of cloud. I hesitated, feeling it would be rude to ask if he was dead. He didn't look it. "I'm not dead, am I?" I asked instead, wishing to be right. My voice felt weak from lack of use and my throat was dry, so the words were much quieter than I expected. He smiled broadly, his eyes laughing. Was it funny because the answer was no or yes? Worried, my eyes fixed on his face. "Please don't let me be dead." I sighed in relief as he told me I was in hospital and on strong pain medication. Medication I didn't remember being given. What happened? I demanded in my weak voice. He looked bewildered. "You were hurt." I don't think he wanted to explain how badly I'd been hurt, thought the strong drugs were a pretty good indication. As for how I'd been hurt, shit, even I didn't want to think about that. I tried to explain to him what I remembered of the last things I'd seen before waking up here. Nurses and scissors, syringes and simpering cartoon characters. How do I describe there's a huge gaping hole in my memory and I'm asking him to fill it? How do you describe a huge gaping hole except that it's dark? I shook my head, trying not to think of the dark again. I swallowed. What happened? I asked him again, my voice louder this time. His words came out in a rush. You fought the nurses. You were so scared. I think they gave you something to make you sleep. You've been asleep for a while. I'd fought the nurses? Why? All I'd wanted to do was find out if he was okay. Haltingly, I told him what I remembered, trying to get up and not being able to, but he interrupted me. He sounded horrified. You did too much as it was. If you'd done any more, we might have lost you. You came so close, Caitlin. Hell, I was scared. His eyes held mine for a second before he looked away. I almost died? When I find out who's responsible, I'm going to hunt them down and kill them slowly. Why didn't I remember? I came that close to death and I didn't even know? My eyes filled with tears that I couldn't wipe away with my useless hands. I tried furiously to blink them away, but what he said next turned the waterworks tap on full. It's over. The shock, the relief, all of it just gushed out of me as I bawled. His hands hesitantly patted my back as he helped me cry into his shirt. It felt like the tears would never end, but they did. Realization came that if he was telling the truth and I'd nearly died, I owed him. I chose my words carefully. Thank you. I think you saved my life. I tried to find a nice way to phrase what I wanted to ask next, but I just couldn't. Who are you? I barely know you. My name is Nathan Miller. I found you lying on the beach. I just brought you into the hospital, he rattled off, as if by rote. So that was his story. And he was Nathan Miller. His sister was Alana Miller. He'd be a prime candidate for Mr. Sleazy Roommate. I found I was looking at my hands, now sedately placed in my lap. For the first time, I noticed the IV line into my right hand, and the pain relief mystery was solved. Focus. Nathan Miller, I repeated carefully, as I tried to find the words to express what I was thinking. Nervously, I licked my dry, cracked lips and made an effort to smile, though my cheeks felt too heavy to do it. Thank you. You chose to keep your promise. Nathan. I watched him carefully for his reaction. First he opened his mouth, as if he had a burning question to ask, but his mouth stayed open as he stared at me. He looked wistful. I dropped my gaze to my lap, counting the seconds slowly before lifting my eyes to meet his again. Contact made. Nathan began to apologize. I started to say that he hadn't hurt me, when I remembered that he'd been hurt. The blood on his shirt and the dressing on his chest. The memory on the dark road was slow to surface. You were shot, I said slowly, reaching up to place my hand over where I remembered the blood, the dressing. I could feel a dressing there still, or at least the roughness of fabric sliding over gauze instead of skin under his shirt. He jumped at my touch, as if even the light contact from my hand hurt him. I drew my hand back. His answer shocked me. Yes. So were you. I was shot? That's how I nearly died? My thoughts whirled in my head, water down a plug hole taking me with them. I could hear his voice continue, but I couldn't make out the words anymore. I tried to open my mouth to ask one of the million swirling questions and choked, coughing so hard I couldn't get a word out. Worn out with coughing, I fought to keep my eyes open. Would he stay to make sure I woke up again? Somehow he understood. I'll be here, he promised, a reassuring smile on his face. I floated away again. 12. When I awoke next, it was daylight. Last night's dark window showed sunlight and blue sky. I stretched and saw the IV was no longer connected to my arm, though the needle was still taped to my hand. Time for a walk, I thought. Let's see which hospital this is and what ward. Is there a guard outside my room, or is Nathan all the protection I have? If he is and they come looking for me, I'm going to die. Carefully, I sat up and dangled my legs off the side of the bed nearest the door, too high up for my feet to reach the floor. I looked for the buttons to control the bed so that I could move it lower, then realized that I couldn't press them. I poised myself on the edge, hesitating a second because of the half-meter drop. I almost put my hands on the mattress beside me to take my weight as I slid off the bed, but then I remembered that my hands were damaged. So, with my hands up as if to demonstrate how defenseless I was, I gave a little jump and my feet hit the floor. The impact set my legs on fire, the muscles turned from ordinary tissue to white-hot, molten metal. Blinded by pain, I swore through gritted teeth as I felt myself falling forward with fuck all I could do about it. I instinctively stuck my hands out to break my fall. The bones in my hands caught the same agonizing fire before the rest of my body hit the floor heavily. Tears sprang to my eyes, but they burned away on my hot cheeks. Fucking perverted bastards. Bloody legs that wouldn't fucking work. I reached up to the bed to try and pull myself up again, before I realized that my useless hands couldn't grab anything. Damn bed too bloody high up. Fucking linen. Bloody broken fingers. I didn't realize I was swearing out loud until Nathan appeared in front of me, asking what was wrong. What wasn't wrong, I thought bitterly, as I added to the list of things to swear about. I can't fucking walk and I can't fucking get up. I felt like biting his toes off to quell my frustration. Here, let me help you. His words were gentle. "It's either that or stay here on the fucking floor all day," I muttered. His arms closed around me, cradling me to his chest, so I could both hear and feel his laughter at my reply. Instinctively I wanted to shrink away from his touch, from anyone and everyone else, yet at the same time I relaxed, telling myself, "You're safe. This is Nathan. He won't hurt you." Nathan let out a small grunt of pain as he lifted me up. I wondered whether his wound had healed enough for him to be lifting anything, but he didn't make another sound as he carefully put me back into bed, pulling the sheets up to cover me again. He rubbed his shoulder almost unconsciously as he sat in the chair beside my bed. Belatedly I thanked him. "What happened?" he asked, echoing my words from the day before. What to tell him? I was useless, I couldn't walk and my hands and legs didn't work. I was a sitting target for anyone. And I didn't know if I could trust him to protect me. I tried to be vague. I got out of bed, tried to take a step and it hurt. Then I fell. Tell him. He'd find out anyway. At least now I'd see his reaction, I'd know if I couldn't trust him. "I can't walk if it hurts that much," I admitted grudgingly. He told me to stay in bed and rest, smiling kindly. I wondered if there was a nice way to tell him I didn't believe he could protect me. If he was as useless as my legs at present, they'd find me and hurt me again. I looked away from him as I tried not to cry. My eyes lighted on the door beside the one leading out of the room. I was trying to get to the bathroom. Well, with all the IV fluid they'd pumped into me as I slept, I did want to make use of the facilities in the ensuite. Second to my desire to live was the pressing need to go to the loo. Nathan didn't hesitate, he offered to carry me. I wanted to ask if it would hurt him, but I fought the urge. He knew his own limitations, I wasn't even sure of mine yet. I felt like an overfilled water balloon, so my only reply was to thank him as he carried me to the toilet. The feeling of his skin against mine made me self-conscious about the hospital gown I wore and how little it covered, though Nathan didn't seem to be fazed about it. He lifted me up deftly, carried me to the bathroom quickly and put me down gently, as if this were something he did every day as part of his job. A bathrobe would be nice, I thought. I decided to buy one when I could go shopping, just in case I was ever stuck in hospital wearing one of these again. Nathan's back blocked the doorway and he didn't say anything for a few minutes until he burst out, "If you want, I could ask my sister to drop by your house the next time she comes in to see me. She could pick up some of your own clothes for you to wear." Mortified, I realized he was just as aware of my near nakedness as I was. I choked back the horrified reply I wanted to make, so I could politely refuse his offer as coherently as possible. I reached for the toilet paper and it started to dawn on me how useless my hands were. First one hand, then the other, no, I couldn't even grasp it. But with two hands together, I could hold something between them if I concentrated. Right. Play it out, carefully. With one bandaged hand, I pushed the roll of toilet paper, making it unroll slowly. "Okay, faster now. Let me know when you're done and need my help again." His voice made me jump and knock the toilet roll back the other way. I'm not done, but I may need your help in a minute." My throat was dry and my voice failed somewhere in the middle. "Don't turn around. Don't look yet," I begged him silently, as I tried to unroll the toilet paper again. The only thing worse than having to plan every step to wipe your own bum is knowing someone else watched you do it. "Please don't look." Too late. Nathan leaned over me, deft hands grabbing the toilet paper I wanted, before he gave it to me. Helping me. Then he called me a kitten, wearing a worried smile. My eyes locked on his as I used the toilet paper as quickly as I could. Kitten. Meow. I struggled to understand the comparison. Something to do with pawing the toilet paper? I lifted my useless hands up and they did resemble white paws a little. Why try to hide it from him? He knew how disabled I was. I looked up to meet his concerned gaze. For the first time I saw the dark circles beneath his eyes. He lost sleep over me? He genuinely seemed to want to help me. I made an effort to try to smile, though my cheeks still felt too stiff and heavy to do it properly. Meow. I feel about as weak as a kitten, so the comparison is probably right. I let out a breath I hadn't been aware I was holding. Now I would appreciate your help one more time because I think you're right. I need to rest in bed a bit longer. At your service. His arms closed around me again, carrying me back to bed, where he covered me with the sheet, as clinical as any nurse. As if he'd read my mind, Nathan reminded me that while I was in hospital I could ask the nurses for help. Didn't he realize that I couldn't press the nurse call button? I kept my eyes down, hoping he wouldn't read that thought too. Then inspiration hit, as I thought of something true that wouldn't sound like an excuse. I told him I didn't like strangers touching me. Too many strangers had touched me, hurt me. I felt myself shudder at the memories that threatened to pull me back down into despair. I tried to focus on what he was saying, his words a lifeline out of the dark. And the last time you asked a random stranger for help, you ended up in hospital with him and now you can't get rid of him. He even followed you into the bathroom. That was a joke, I told myself. He was trying to be funny. But I'd never asked him for help, yet he kept helping me. I looked down at my lap, where his warm hand covered both of mine. The contact didn't make me shudder, in fact, it felt comforting. I looked up again to meet his worried eyes and wistful smile. I want to trust you, I thought. After you saved my life, got shot and even helped me wipe my... I tried to put it into words but failed. I started again. I don't think you qualify as a random stranger anymore. I would like to think you're a very good friend, even if I don't know you very well. Will you be my friend, Nathan, or are you going to join the list of bastards I want to kill? He made a weak joke in reply, but the real answer was in his expression. For the first time his smile reached his eyes, which didn't look worried. Just relieved. 13. Dark Chris falling card headache. Oh shit. You're better than I thought. I felt my body falling, but I didn't hit the ground. His arms tightened around my back, pressing my face against something soft. The knife slipped from my fingers as I tried to stop him from smothering me. The impact with the floor jolted me, but it was softer than I expected. The restraining arm released me. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the dizziness to fade. I needed to fight. I knew what I was lying on, and it wasn't good. I almost whimpered in fright as I felt the foam mattress depress beneath his weight, not far from me. I slid my hand carefully into my pocket for the card, desperate for another blade to replace the one I'd stabbed into the mattress instead of him. One hand at my shoulder, another on my thigh stopped me dead. I froze in fear. 1, 2, he murmured. What about 3? What happens on 3? I wanted to scream, biting down so I didn't make a sound. With an ease that suggested plenty of practice moving unconscious people, he rolled me over onto my back. I shoved my hand deeper into my pocket, fishing for a weapon. If only I could see to use it. My head pounded its own rhythm as his fingers crept beneath my neck. I could feel the heat of him close beside me, leaning over me. The ache intensified as he lifted my head. I couldn't see, but I sure could spit. If you're going to try to force me to give you a blowjob, I'll bite your chipolata of a cock right off. I had the card out of my pocket, and I was ready to stab him with the corkscrew if I could pull it out. He moved away, to my considerable satisfaction. I felt his weight ease off the mattress and breathed again. I'd found the edge of the scissors. He laughed softly as his hand closed over both my fingers and the Swiss card. Fair warning. You won't need that against me. Put it away. You might need it later. He clicked on a torch, searching for something. I blinked, trying to focus. My heart sank as I realized he'd shut the door behind him. I prayed it wasn't locked. Here. Don't lose this. He took the card from my hand and slid the knife back in. Good thing you stabbed the mattress and not me. Why? I spat back, shoving the card back in my pocket. I can't help you if I'm dead or dying. Here. It's juice. He pushed a plastic bottle into my hand. I opened the bottle, turning my head to the side to drink so I didn't bring on the dizziness again. My mouth tasted horrible and I tried to swish away all traces of drugs or blood before I swallowed. Silently, he waited. When I'd lubricated my throat enough, I interrupted his reverie. Why would you help me? I struggled to sit up. He dropped the torch on the floor, lifting both hands to my chest, stopping just before he touched me. Like he wanted to push me down again, but he didn't dare. No hurry. Lie down as long as you need to, until you recover. He gave you a second dose of chloroform in the car, so you were under for a while. You want me lying down so you can rape me? I heard you talking. I glared at him, hoping he could see my malice in the dim light. You stay away from me or I'll use the knife on you. 14. I heard you were awake, hon. A motherly-looking woman in a hospital uniform smiled at me, giving me a quick wink as she placed a tray on the table over my bed. I wasn't sure what you'd like, so I picked out the best of this morning's breakfast menu for you. I'll give you your menu too, so you can order what you like for tomorrow. She poured me a glass of orange juice. Thank you, I replied in a hushed voice. She smiled in reply before she left through the open door. I could see the hospital corridor outside my room, with the food trolley full of breakfast trays. I glanced over at Nathan, who was very focused on his food, his mouth already full. I guess it wasn't poisoned then. I looked down at my tray. A covered plate, a glass of orange juice, a box of cereal in a bowl with packaged milk, and a small bowl of diced fruit. It wouldn't have looked out of place on an aeroplane. I couldn't remember the last time I'd had anything to eat or drink. I wasn't sure how my stomach would cope. I stretched one hand out for the orange juice, then realized I'd need both hands for this. I cradled the glass in between the bandages, like a hot drink on a cold day, and took a cautious sip before putting the glass down again. I'd wait a few minutes, then see if I should have anything else. What was the last thing I had? Oh, that Coke. A warm can Nathan had in his pocket on the beach. He'd cracked it open, drunk a little to show me it was okay, then he'd helped me drink it. Giving me the energy to do something stupid that got him shot. No, don't think about that now. I forced myself to concentrate on the orange juice, the fruit and the covered plate. Don't look at the bowl with the milk. I focused so hard on the tray I wasn't aware of Nathan getting out of bed until he came between me and my breakfast, leaning over me to press the button to call a nurse. I exclaimed in surprise, I'm sure I swore. He pretended he hadn't heard. You need someone to help you with your breakfast, he said. Don't need help yet. Right now I just needed to decide whether I'd keep the orange juice down. One more sip. I reached for the juice carefully, concentrating so hard my teeth ground together. I was managing fine, I told him. Then I wasn't. Something went wrong and the orange juice tipped off the tray onto the bed. Between my damaged hands and useless legs, the most I could do to get away from the mess was to swing my legs off the side of the bed, shuffling toward the pillows. Now what? I wanted to get up and rip the damp sheets off the bed, bundle them into a washing machine and get fresh ones. But I couldn't. Nathan stood frozen with his mouth open, just staring at me. I looked back at the juice, running across the top of the sheets toward the bed's lowest point. Of course, this was the bit bearing the most weight, compressed under my backside. Orange juice in open wounds, soaking into my dressings. Torture. I could avoid this. This will hurt too, I told myself, but it's only a few steps. I fixed my eyes on the chair by my bed and took a deep breath. Warm and gentle, Nathan's arms lifted me off my bed. My head against his chest, I could both hear and feel the rumble of his voice as he said quietly, "Please let me help." Surprise. Relief. Comfort. I realized I felt safe. Tears of gratitude sprang to my eyes and I struggled not to shed them. Distracted, I barely noticed as he bypassed the chair to lay me carefully in his bed. He turned away from me almost immediately, shifting the breakfast trays around until they were side by side on a table in front of me, blurring as my tears multiplied. I reached for a tissue automatically, but his hand was there first. "I'm here to help," his eyes said, though he didn't say a word. I expected him to give me the tissue, but I was stunned as he touched the tissue to my eyes, my cheeks and my nose, wiping my face carefully as if he did this every day. It wasn't until he turned away, crossing the room to drop the tissue in the bin, that I found my voice. It took 2 tries to get the words out, and even then my voice was so quiet, I don't think he heard me over the running water as he washed his hands. "Thank you." When Nathan returned, he sat beside me and started to help me with my breakfast. A waft of steam, sulfur and salt as he lifted the cover. Those eggs smelled good. He opened the butter and began spreading it across my toast. He was going to help me. Maybe even feed me. He lifted up the box of cereal, pouring cornflakes into the bowl. Dark thoughts stirred, a memory of stale dry cereal in the dark, choking it down as unseen hands fed me. Even the thought of being fed like a baby again makes me lose my appetite. My throat contracted at the memory. Desperately, I tried to force it away. He said something that I didn't catch as he started cutting my eggs into small pieces. He loaded a piece onto the fork and held it out for me. Not like feeding a baby, more like holding a carrot out to tempt a horse. I closed my eyes and ate even that small bite carefully. How long since I'd last had solid food? Could my stomach handle it? I realized that I couldn't make it to the toilet to throw up. I'd be sick on the floor or in Nathan's bed. Either way, he'd see me do it, and that's a horrible thing to do to someone. But I'm not going to be sick, I told myself. I was hungry, not nauseous. I opened my eyes to meet his. "More?" he asked, already loading up the fork again. "Please?" I tried to respond with a smile of my own, but my face still felt too heavy. Not once did he make a belittling comment. He offered me every bite, as courteous as a waiter proffering a tray of finger food. 2 bites into the toast and I was full, my stomach shrunken after so much time eating so little. "More toast?" he asked, holding up the barely touched slice. "Or some cereal?" He reached for the spoon. I shook my head as emphatically as I could, trying to keep my eyes on the toast and the toast inside my stomach. I forced myself to swallow. My mouth was dry. Now I could have done with the spilled orange juice. My eyes strayed to my bed, where the orange had soaked into the sheets like dye. He's kind, I told myself. He even tried to save me from humiliating myself, which is far more than he promised. He reached for something on his tray as I put my arms around him, holding him close so that he'd hear me thank him this time. Too late, I realized that he'd picked up his own juice, which he now held precariously in his hand. As the juice in the glass slopped dangerously, I pulled back from him, not wanting to spill this one too. Embarrassed, I looked down at my hands. The nurse's voice startled me. She shouldn't be out of her bed. Nathan explained to her how my bed needed fresh sheets because of spilled orange juice. He loaded the explanation with innuendo, reinforced with a charming smile, until the nurse blushed and stumbled over her words. Hello, Mr. Sleazy Roommate, I thought, turning away to hide my smile. I wondered why he hadn't turned on the charm for me yet. Maybe he liked tall blonde girls with bigger boobs than mine. His knuckles were white as he gripped the glass of orange juice, its contents still not quite steady. He set it down on the tray, focusing on flirting with the nurse. So I didn't imagine it, the way he jumped when I touched him, I thought. I hadn't hurt him this time, I'd been careful not to touch where he'd been shot. I made this charming man nervous and unsettled. The thought cheered me even more, and I felt a smile on my lips that was lighter than before. His eyes were on the nurse changing my bed linen, so he didn't see me smile. Nor did he notice me stealing the remainder of his orange juice. 15. Are you sure you'll be okay? Nathan asked, looking worried. I surveyed the remains of my breakfast tray. Only the cereal was untouched, just like yesterday. He'd switched the TV on, and there was a movie on that I hadn't seen yet. He seemed antsy to leave, so I did my best to look capable as I replied, Sure. I'll survive till you come back to feed me my next meal. If I could have crossed my fingers, I would have. I felt a peculiar sense of panic that he was deserting me so soon, only a day after I was fully awake. I needed to know that he'd be back. Nathan smiled. I wouldn't miss it. My heart relaxed. See you when you get back then, I said lightly, forcing my eyes to the TV screen. Nathan said some form of goodbye and left, looking as reluctant as I felt. He'd been gone for maybe 2 minutes before a nurse came in. Hi, she said. I don't know if you remember me, I'm Judith. We worked together a little when you were on prac. I looked at her and she did look vaguely familiar, but I couldn't remember much about her. Were you the one who told me about the food in the dining room? I guessed. Judith smiled. Recommending you try the day's curry and avoid the fish and chips? That sounds like me. She held up a piece of paper. Your friend wanted me to ask you to ring her whenever your sleazy roommate was out. Now your guard is phoning in his daily report, he won't hear me. I brightened. I have a guard? Nathan didn't just leave me here alone. She laughed. No, he has a host of his muscly mates standing guard in the corridor, watching everyone like bouncers do. She cleared her throat, offering the paper to me. I leaned over to read the writing. I recognized Joe's name and number. I looked up at Judith. She wants to come and visit? She winked. Yes, but when he's not around. I'll help you dial. She pressed the buttons and helped me cradle the receiver between my cheek and my shoulder. I'll be in and out, making your bed and changing your linen, so I'll be back in a minute, okay? She said, and I nodded, the phone ringing in my ear. Hello? Joe yawned. Good morning, I replied. Oh. You're up. I'll be right there. Oh wait, here's Jason. He can keep you company on the phone till I get there. The phone crackled as the receiver was passed over. Good morning, beautiful, Jason teased. I looked around. Judith must have gone to get fresh sheets. Shut up, Jason. I definitely don't feel it today. Ah, you're always beautiful, no matter what you're wearing. Is it one of those skimpy hospital gowns that show off your ass? He said lazily in the voice that made other girls pat their hair and check to see they were showing enough cleavage. My response was a little different. Fuck off. My ass is none of your business, nor is what I'm wearing. They've got me wrapped up like a mummy, for reasons I have yet to find out. You should stay away from the hospital or I'll set the nurses on you. They've already decided they don't like my roommate. They'd probably stake you outside for the bandicoots. Jason laughed. He never did believe me. An endless bloody optimist toward relationships, he was the biggest pessimist when it came to music, work or anything else. Not even for your birthday? I realized I didn't know what day it was. How long till my birthday? He laughed again. They must be giving you some really good drugs at the hospital. Your birthday's next week. I was going to give you the best present ever, me in my birthday suit. I suppressed the thought of him naked. Once I might have thought of him in the way he wanted, but that was when I was much younger. Cool, you do that. I could do with a laugh. Bring a magnifying glass with you, I need a new practice dummy for taekwondo. I waited for that to sink in. I'd used him as a punching bag once when I was still at school, and I hoped he remembered. I'd had a couple of drinks of vodka at his birthday party, and decided to give him a birthday kiss. He'd stuck his clumsy tongue in my mouth, his groping hand up my shirt and his horny hips against mine. I hoped he still hurt from my drunken self-defense. I'd kneed him so hard I think I'd have broken his boner, if it had had bones in more than name. His next laugh sounded forced. Okay, maybe a different present then, but not as good. Yeah, whatever, I replied, losing interest. I wondered when Judith would be back to help me end the call. So, when do you think you'll be ready to play again? Jason blurted out, as if that's what he really wanted to ask. I looked at my gauzy hands. A month, I decided. It'd take a fair few finger exercises to get my hands back to normal after they'd healed, but I could get by with just a keyboard for most gigs, if we stayed away from the songs where I had to pick up a guitar. Fuck. A whole month? I hurt my hands. They need to heal. In a month I'll probably have a few new songs for you to learn too. That'll take you a while, I replied. New ones? I got us a gig playing in one of the pubs in Frio, regular Saturday nights. As soon as you're old enough you can be in too, he said, sounding generous. I snorted. As soon as I'm 18 I'll be telling you where we have our gigs, as well as what to play. It's my band, Jason, even if I can't play in pubs till after next week. Don't you forget it. Or you'll have pleckies where your nipples should be. I forgot Jason liked kinky stuff. Anytime you like, baby. Fuck. Call me baby one more time and I'll shove your guitar up your ass. I felt my body shudder as the shadow of a dark dream crossed my mind. A throwaway statement now held horrible memories. I forced myself to focus on the phone conversation and nothing else. And on that note I'll leave you to think about my tight ass, and see you later. He hung up. Fucking Jason. He was a decent singer and a good guitarist, but a hellishly horny human being. The day I got with him would be the day before I killed myself, and the day after all of hell's demons had a career change selling ice cream, fresh from the ice caves of hell. He might be Joe's brother, but I thought he'd sing better if he didn't think with his balls. Judith came in, maybe a moment later. All done? She smiled. I brought you a fresh nightie. Let's get you changed before Mr. Sleazy gets back. I knew she was talking about Nathan, but if she'd met Jason, she wouldn't have worried. 16. Dark Chris Angel Baby Apple. He swallowed, sounding nervous. If I stay where you can see me but I can't touch you, will you lie down? You need to recover. You'll need your strength. He moved a few meters away, sitting cross-legged on the concrete with his torch on me. I lay down again, my eyes never leaving him. Why would you help me? I demanded again. Because I didn't ask to do this. None of this was my idea. I woke up in the back of that car maybe half an hour before you came by. But you're going along with it. Bondage, like out of some stupid erotica book, I responded furiously. I tied you loosely and took the card from your bag. I slipped it into your pocket, before they made me throw the bag out the window. His voice dropped lower. Your name's Caitlin, right? I started at the sound of my name. How'd you know? Your driver's license, Caitlin. I stayed silent for a moment, but the urge to speak won. Don't. My name is for my friends. You're not my friend. You're someone I'm going to kill. I have to call you something. Baby. The laughter in his voice set my teeth on edge. Fuck you. Call me that and I'll strangle you with my bare hands. Angel? It's written on the front of your shirt. My shirt says I'm no angel, stupid. I didn't say it. Fine, I said instead. Do you want some Panadol for your headache, Angel? It sounded like a caress or an endearment, the way he said it. Sleazy bastard. Yes, I admitted. He stretched out his arm and placed an open plastic box in the torch beam beside me. It's fruit. Eat something first. He dropped 2 pills on the plastic lid, sticking it on the floor next to the box. I ate a couple of pieces of apple before I washed the pills down with my last mouthful of juice. He said nothing. I broke the silence. Why am I here? What do you want from me? I could hear the fear in his voice. I don't know. 17. The knock at the door surprised me. I looked up, expecting to see Judith. Good morning. Are you decent? Jo's voice startled me as she peered around the door with a smile. Probably not, but there's not much I can do about it, I thought. Instead, I tried to smile and told her to come in. She came straight to the bed and gave me a one-armed hug, a plastic bag in her other hand. Then she perched on the bed near my feet and said conspiratorially, I brought presents, as she dumped the bag in front of me. Ooh, what? I asked, curious. Please don't let it be a bottle of passion pop. She started pulling things out of the bag. Chocolate, those sherbet things you like. I wasn't sure if you'd get any of your stuff from home, with your dad still up north for a few more weeks, so I picked up a few things from the shop that I thought you'd need. Pajamas and some underwear. She pulled out a pair of satin pajamas and a couple of pairs of knickers, all with the tags still on. She laid them on the bed. A brush and some bathroom stuff. Including this. She held out an electric toothbrush, still in the packaging, looking triumphant. I stared at the pink electric toothbrush, its handle in the shape of a Disney princess, trying not to remember my last attempt to brush my teeth. I'd managed to get the brush into my mouth, but that was about it. Asking Nathan for help had proved even more disastrous. After the first time he'd almost choked me, he hadn't been game to help me brush more than my front teeth. With an electric toothbrush, I might be able to brush my own teeth. I looked up at her again, more grateful than I could say. Thank you. She smiled nervously at my strange tone. They only had kids' battery toothbrushes, so it was Disney princesses or Dora the Explorer. I thought you'd prefer a princess one. This one's Aurora, Sleeping Beauty. It came out all in a rush. I laughed weakly. Yep, I guess that's me. It's a wonder I woke up at all. With that sobering thought, all hope of laughter died. At least you're looking better, Jo said quickly with a forced smile. Where's your gallant hero this morning? Off polishing his sword? Her face was set, so I knew she was going to rant. Oh, come on. The half-crazed look in his eyes, full of guilt for what he did to you, and the anguish he's causing you now by sticking around? You're barely a shadow of yourself. What did he do to you? Nothing. He did nothing. I didn't bother opening my mouth. Once she got into stride, she'd keep going till she ran out of breath. I waited, my eyes on the earrings she put in, one upside down, one sideways. She must have left home in a hurry. Caitlin, please. You cry at the drop of a hat, and there he is saying nonsensical things like, it's all over now, when it never will be, not until you get rid of him. She paused again. The bruises on your face are fading. You're starting to look almost normal now. At least he isn't hitting you anymore." I let the words wash over me without really hearing them, but she knew me too well to let me get away with it for long. She brought her face so close to mine I couldn't focus on it. "It's lucky that he found you when he did." When I met her eyes, she continued, "It's incredibly lucky that he was walking on that bit of beach just after you were dumped there. It couldn't be a coincidence, he knew you'd be dumped there, didn't he? He was one of them." I sighed. I had to say something. I was lucky he was there. "It's all right, you can tell me. I know he was one of them." She looked feverishly eager. Was she talking aliens and conspiracy theories? "One of them?" "One of the ones who hurt you," she said slowly. She looked expectant. Now I could say something. Now she'd hear me. "Nathan never hurt me." She snorted. "What, you're telling me none of this hurt when he did it?" She pointed at my hands and the dressings on my wrists. "When he cut you, when he tied you up, when he broke your fingers, when he raped you." The tears started, part anger and part pain. My anger packed more power into my voice than I'd intended. "No. He never did anything like that. He couldn't do that to me. He would never." "You didn't always see the face of the man who was hurting you, did you?" Joe demanded. My voice died to a whisper. "I don't have to see his face or know his name to know who he is, Joe. He's not one of the men who hurt me." Nathan advanced into the room as if he'd been listening outside, and couldn't stay out any longer. I felt grateful for his presence. He said something to her, but I didn't hear it. She opened her mouth to deliver an angry reply. I shook my head slightly, lifting my hand to wave goodbye. She returned the wave and left without another word. I settled into Nathan's comforting embrace and let the tears flow until they ran dry. Anger and pain drained out of me with the salt water, leaving a contemplative calm. I lifted my head from his chest to help him wipe my face, and a flash of pink caught my eye. The electric toothbrush. I could have clean teeth again. I smiled through my tears. 18. Carol bustled in with an armload of dressing packs. "Time to change your dressings. Let's see how you're healing up." She smiled for all she was worth, but her eyes told me she was putting a positive spin on something she liked as little as I did. She didn't want to see my wounds, either. I felt sorry for her, but I was happy to see her. It was a relief to know both the ward and the hospital I'd been sent to, not to mention see a familiar face in uniform. "Hi, Carol. Of all the wards to bring me to, I ended up in yours." Her cheery smile didn't reach her eyes. She was trying to tell me something without words. "Of course. St. Elsie's is the best hospital and we're its best ward. We had to fight for you, but we traded a couple of sporting injury patients to the other wards to keep you." Sporting injury patients went to the day surgery. In and out in a day, such patients were rarely sent to a ward at all. Fight for me? Oh, perhaps she meant they'd fight for me if they had to. It was a sweet thought, but I couldn't allow any of the capable nurses on this ward to stand in the way of a bastard who wanted to kill me. What if one of them killed him before I could? I forced a laugh. "You just wanted fewer names to learn at handover." Carol laughed easily as if my joke had been funny. "You know it. Actually, while you were asleep, there have been some very interesting men in the ward keeping guard over you. I almost thought about asking them to pull out their weapons." I saw her eyes drift in Nathan's direction before coming back to me. Mr. Sleazy roommate had been busy charming the nurses in the ward while I slept, and she was trying to warn me. Nathan looked worried. I realized there was something he didn't want me to know, so I feigned ignorance. "I have guards?" "Sure, a different police officer every day, like some sort of desk calendar." They make sure you don't have any unwelcome visitors. Plus, this time her glance at Nathan was more obvious. Had he told the staff that he was my boyfriend, so that they'd let him stay? I stared at him, wondering if he'd really done something so silly. There was more he wasn't telling me. As he averted his eyes, I wondered how much of it I already knew. I remembered something and tried not to smile as I spoke. I thought you had a new man, Scott. How does he stack up against the desk calendar guys, or is he out of the picture now? I'm still with Scott, but that doesn't mean I can't look. Carol drifted off and so did my thoughts. She broke my reverie. So where do we start? She had a hand on the curtain and another question in her eyes. She wanted to know whether I wanted the curtain pulled across, so Nathan didn't see. I gave a slight shake of my head and shrugged. What does it matter? I guess it's time for me to see what they've done to me, I replied, too tired to keep up the cheerful tone. My eyes met Carol's as her hands hovered over me, staying close to my thigh. I nodded, knowing she'd deal with the worst wound first. I braced myself as she ripped the dressing off as carefully as she could. I wasn't prepared for what I saw. Fuck, that looks bad. I burst out. There was a deep hole in my leg. The nasty gaping wound had been sliced open further with a scalpel and then stitched closed before it had started to heal, but the scar was going to show for the rest of my life. No bloody wonder it hurt to walk. I shouldn't be on that until the stitches were out. Carol's eyes met mine, hurting for me. A skin graft over that would help hide the scar, she said reassuringly, as if I didn't already know that. I wondered why it hadn't already been done. The truth dawned on me as I looked at the gauze shroud I'd been enveloped in. But where would you take the graft from? Everywhere is a shroud I could still be buried in. Oh shit. Tears formed and fell, as if I had no control over my own bloody body anymore. Hey, that's the worst of your wounds. The rest are healing up nicely. You'll see. Ever the professional, Carol tried to reassure me as she continued. She smoothed the new dressing down and moved to the next one. I barely felt the rip, making me wonder if my pain relief dose was still high. I watched as she worked, counting the wounds hidden under the white. Oh God. Nathan stood beside me and I hadn't noticed him move. Carol quickly shifted the sheet so it covered more of me, but his eyes were fixed on the soft flesh of my inner thigh. The horror in his expression told me he wasn't perving on me in any normal sense of the word. He looked like he was going to cry. It was instinctive, my stupid desire to hug a grown man as if he was a child who could be comforted. But he accepted it, hugging me tightly as if he'd been the one hurt. Somehow, despite how strange it seemed, I felt comforted by the contact. Whatever his motives were, at least he made me feel better. Or he would if. I winced as Carol ripped off another dressing. She was right to keep going without hesitation. The faster she changed my dressings, the sooner she'd be done with them. And the less I had to see of the messy red, white and blue-gray mosaic my body had become. 19. Dark my Chris kiss no. So you fucked her, then untied her and dressed her again? Mike sounded incredulous. Well, it was cold and she wanted to put her clothes back on. So yeah. If he'd said it was dark at night the way he said that, I wouldn't have believed him. Bullshit. This sounded closer. I kept my eyes tightly closed, hoping that he'd go away if I was asleep. No, that only works for children's nightmares. Not real ones. Get her up and on her feet. The foot that kicked my leg could only have been Mike's. But she's still not well after the drugs you gave her. Chris hedged. Then she'll be easier to control. Get her up and hold her for me. A light hand touched my shoulder. Come on, wake up, Chris murmured. Chris was on my left. Mike was down near my feet. I rolled to my right, praying the dizziness had dissipated. If it hadn't, I knew how this would end. I shifted into a crouch, ready to defend myself but not knowing how. "No!" I shouted. "Fuck! Hold her still." Mike edged closer. I backed away from them as Chris started to approach me too. My back touched something. Desperately, I turned to see I'd backed into a corner. No. Swallowing hard, I turned back to face my captors, hands up in what I remembered was a basic block from my self-defense classes. Now I wished I'd taken more classes. "Don't you fucking touch me." Mike sounded completely unfazed. "There's nothing you can do to stop me." Fuck, but he was fast. He grabbed my arms and stomped his boot down on both of my bare feet. I tried to pull free, but he knew what he was doing. He twisted my arms up behind me and held them with one hand. The other he plunged into my hair, grabbing a handful and twisting that too. I couldn't move my head without ripping out my hair. I swallowed a scream. "Now kiss me, bitch." He smiled. "Why?" I spat. "Because you can. You may as well enjoy the last man you ever have." "Fuck you." Shouldn't have opened my mouth. He tasted of ash, stale beer and worse. I retched as he shoved his tongue halfway down my throat, but his body pinning mine to the wall kept me upright. Worse, he enjoyed it. I could feel him hardening against my tummy. I'd have bitten his tongue off if I could have stopped choking. If one horrible kiss was such a violation, how much worse could rape be? Oh God, I didn't want to find out. He'd hurt me. Mike broke his lip lock and grinned. "You will, little bitch. You'll fuck me more than you can handle." "Don't you fucking touch me." I shouted again, trying to squirm away from him. "She's mine," Chris protested. "You promised." He sounded 5 years old instead of a bloke bigger than me. Mike swung me around by my twisted arms, my muscles screaming in pain, slamming my body into Chris's. "The little bitch is all yours if you fuck her right here and now." I spun around to face Chris. My voice came out as a whisper. "No." 20. Nathan's voice told me I was okay. I relaxed, ready to go from dark nightmare to peaceful sleep once more, but I realized that the arms holding me tightly were anything but okay. Then they were gone. I could hear footsteps and breathing in the dark, but no one touched me. "Nathan?" I asked quietly, hoping it was his breathing I'd heard. Someone touched me again, and my reaction was automatic and unexpected. Instead of wanting to claw his eyes out, I found myself relaxing into his embrace. This was not fucking okay. What if it had been someone else, someone I couldn't trust? I shoved at him and he let go of me. I tried to ignore the hurt look on his face as I demanded, "What are you doing? Why were you touching me when I woke up?" His expression went from hurt to horrified, and he didn't know how to explain. "You've been having a lot of really bad nightmares and you wouldn't wake up. You were screaming. Screaming for me to help you. You didn't scream as much if I hugged you." It started to dawn on me that I had no idea just how much he'd done while I was asleep. I was sure I'd heard his voice while I slept, and I needed to know if what I remembered was real or just part of one of my many fucked up dreams. "How often have you hugged me?" I asked carefully. If I dragged the answer out of him with pliers, it wouldn't have come any easier. "Whenever you had nightmares until you stopped screaming." I held his gaze, trying to be sure he was telling the truth. He'd been here for every nightmare, every scream. My first thought was to wonder why he'd bothered, but I wasn't ready to ask him that yet. He started to elaborate without a word from me. "I did it because I couldn't wake you up. I promised." I promised I wouldn't let them hurt you, and they were hurting you in your dreams. I couldn't just sit by and do nothing." He looked scared. Somehow, I decided that he was telling the truth. It had been his voice I'd heard, telling me to keep fighting, through all the bad dreams and hellish nightmares. He kept going, his voice climbing higher in his desperation to make me believe him, but I wasn't paying attention to his words anymore in his rising panic. I cut in as he paused for breath. "That explains some things," I finished, not willing to tell him how many times his voice had broken into my nightmares, nor that I felt comfortable in his arms. I couldn't afford to be comfortable in anyone's arms, not yet. For my own safety, I had to do this. "Nathan, could you do me a favor?" "Sure," he replied without hesitation. I breathed a sigh of relief, careful not to let it show. "Next time I have a bad dream, can you please wake me up first?" My eyes held his to demand his answer. His smile looked relieved. "Sure, with pleasure." His eyes held a glint that I didn't trust. I pulled away from him even further. I didn't care if he'd just made an innocent comment. I couldn't give in to anyone, not yet. So I tried to clarify it, to make sure he understood. "But please don't touch me." The light in his eyes died. I'd guessed correctly, the innuendo was in there for a reason. He didn't look at me or say anything else as he wandered back to his bed. I relaxed in mind, wishing this whole mess could be over. That I could consider giving in to Mr. Sleazy Roommate, if only for a moment. But that was out of the question now. I heard Nathan sigh as if he agreed with me. Of course he did. 21. "Bye, Dad," I said softly and batted the button to end the call. I heard a few seconds of dial tone before I managed to silence it. I lay back and sighed. Part of me wished to have a hero for a father, who'd have come charging in the day those bastards took me, before they could do any damage. But my dad wasn't like that. He had too many of his own fears to face up to. He and I both knew he couldn't stand to see me hurt. It'd remind him of losing my mother. I wasn't surprised that he'd been away the whole time I'd been gone and he was planning a longer stint. Even the faint possibility of losing me would have turned him into a bigger workaholic than before. One day I'd have to sit him down properly and get him to tell me what had really happened to her. But not before he'd worked off his present panic at nearly losing me. I breathed a sigh of relief that he wouldn't be back soon. That'd give me the time and space to finish this without placing him in danger too. I wouldn't be out of danger until they were gone. "I'm sorry, Dad, if it costs me my life to end this, but I can't move on unless I know they can never hurt me again. And for that, I'll need to see them safely to hell. Even if it means escorting those bastards there personally." "Evening meds." Carol sang out, rattling the pill cup. I smiled and opened my eyes. "Can I have some milk with that today? I'd like to sleep early." "Hot or cold?" she asked. "Cold," I replied instantly. She returned perhaps a minute later with a mug I recognized from the handover room. She helped me tip the cup of pills into my mouth and held the mug while I sipped the milk. "Are you okay? Do you need more pain medication?" she asked, looking concerned. I smiled. "No, I'm sure you're giving me too many already. I can't feel any pain right now." She hesitated. "It's just that you've been crying. Did your roommate say something he shouldn't have? Or is he too professional, pretending he doesn't care about you? You know he's barely left your side since you arrived. I even caught him cuddling up to you in bed a couple of times." She looked at me in alarm. "Nothing sleazy. He wrapped you in your bed linen and then did the same for himself, like he didn't want to scare you. I swear that boy would do anything for you. He absolutely adores you, you know." She tipped the cup up so I could finish off the milk. "There's more to it than you realize. I smiled and licked the milk off my lips before replying, I know. No, I just miss my father is all. He called and he works away so much. I don't want him to see me like this, he'd treat me like a child and it wouldn't help me recover any faster. Carol lifted her shoulders in a checked shirt shrug. Sounds like my dad. They can't deal with their daughters growing up. Let me know if there's anything else you need. The phone rang. She looked at me for a moment. I held up my useless hands. Could you hit the speakerphone button, please? Oh. Sure, she replied, doing so. Hello? I said uncertainly. I'm after Miss Caitlin Lockyer. This is Detective Neil McGuinness. Carol's eyes widened and she hurried out, mug in hand. I heard the door close quietly as I directed my voice at the phone. That's me, Detective. His tone turned warmer. I'm happy to hear you're awake. You must have been through a lot. I bet there are a few people who hoped you wouldn't wake up. Not here, Detective, I replied softly. Here in the hospital, everyone's been really helpful. He coughed. Good. Look, I've been working on your case ever since you disappeared, and I'd like nothing better than to catch the people who hurt you, so I can put them in prison for a long time. Can I come visit you in hospital so we can have a little chat about anything you can remember that might help me find them? Prison? But they might leave there still alive, if there's enough evidence to convict them at all. What if a court finds them not guilty? Miss Lockyer? I stared at the empty pill cup Carol had left behind in her haste. Yes. Can I come to the hospital tomorrow and... I said yes, Detective. See you tomorrow. This time I managed to get the button on the second bat with my bandaged hand. Do I tell the police everything tomorrow and trust them to take care of the men who hurt me, or do I find another way, one that will make sure they can never hurt me again? Do I trust the police? I knew the answer to that one if I had to ask myself such a question. Before all this perhaps, but now? No. They shot me. Do I trust Nathan? I pressed my head into the pillow, closing my eyes. I heard the man himself enter the room, but I didn't move nor open my eyes. I didn't want to look at him, for fear I'd say something I shouldn't. That boy would do anything for you. Would you kill for me, Nathan? 22. Dark my Chris kiss, no beautiful bastard. He caught me around the waist before I could move away. My terror rose, not knowing what he was going to do. I couldn't move my arms, they tingled painfully from whatever hold Mike had locked them in. You could start with a kiss. Even I did, Mike derided. Chris pulled me closer, holding me tighter, and I couldn't struggle. His hands were gentler than Mike's, nervous and uncertain. Aloud he whispered again, I'm not going to hurt you. Begging me to believe him. One arm a steel band around my waist, with his other hand he gently cupped my face. The heel of his hand under my chin, his fingers curved up around my cheek. Forgive me, he breathed, his face so close to mine I could feel the heat of his breath on my lips. Then he kissed me too. A world of difference. Careful and hesitant, more like a real kiss. I drew in a breath of surprise and closed my eyes. I almost forgot who he was and where we were. Almost. I turned my head away. Don't do that again. His lips almost touched my ear. Thank you. A priceless kiss stolen from a beautiful woman. You smooth, sleazy bastard. I felt my cheeks heat up against my will. For the first time, I was happy it was dark. He released me and I stumbled back. 2 steps and I tripped over the edge of the mattress, which sent me sprawling. You did want her lying down, Mike said with a laugh. What are you waiting for? Realizing my danger, I raised my voice as I struggled to get up. "Touch me and I'll kick your fucking face in," I screamed at Chris. "Mike." "Both of them." Chris's weight landed on top of me, crushing me into the mattress. I raised my hands to claw his eyes out, but he was ready for me, catching my hands in his as Mike had. He wasn't as cruel, he pinned my hands to the mattress above my head instead. I tried to bend my knees up so I could kick him across the room, but he forced his knees between mine, leaving me more vulnerable than before. "No," I whispered again, my voice stolen by fear. Mike's voice seemed thunderous in comparison. "How are you going to do that with him holding you down? Just lie back and take it, bitch. I've got better waiting for you right here." He grabbed his crotch to demonstrate. "Give her an extra 5 minutes for me, Chris." He left, laughing. Chris shifted between my legs. "No please," I whimpered. 23. I couldn't sleep. I heard Nathan settle into his own bed and turn the lights off. I listened to his breathing gradually become even as he drifted off to sleep, but such things eluded me. I turned on one side and then the other, pressing my face into the pillow or staring at the darkened ceiling. Nothing helped. Tomorrow I could tell the police everything or nothing. I could be completely honest and describe my living hell in graphic detail, or I could plead my weakened state as an excuse to delay. After all, it would be normal for someone in my situation not to want to discuss the violence and abuse to which I'd fallen victim. Not everyone had my memory, nor would they have spent their captivity repeating all the facts I knew, so I wouldn't forget anything. And Nathan? What about Nathan? I turned to look at him. He appeared to be having as restless a night as I was, moving around in bed a bit like a fish on a hook. It looks like he's having nightmares, I thought. Hopefully not about me. I rolled onto my back and stared at the ceiling again, then turned toward the bathroom so I couldn't see Nathan anymore. What about Nathan? I wondered what he'd do if he heard me tell my memories. If he wasn't having nightmares now, he would once he'd heard the substance of mine. I couldn't do that to him. He didn't deserve to carry the weight in my head. Knowing those bastards had hurt me was enough for him. He leaped to my defense already. I heard voices and the patter of feet on the floor, so I looked around to see who'd entered the room. A shadow loomed over my bed and I screamed. Closer, closer, reaching for me. No. The light over my bed clicked on and I blinked in the suddenly bright light. Nathan squinted back at me. Not a shadow. Nathan. No need to worry. Shouldn't have screamed. Silly. What is it, Nathan? He smiled at me as I tried to slow my racing heart. I'd been imagining the menace in the shadow as he leaned over me, surely. He'd never hurt me. I'm safe in hospital with you. Right? I tested. His expression didn't change as he replied, yeah. I couldn't tell if his yawn was real or fake. I stared at him, trying to decide. Who gave you your afternoon meds? He asked, looking worried. You scared the shit out of me just to ask me stupid questions? Judith, no Carol. Carol was on last night. I said I was having trouble sleeping, so she found me some milk in the handover room fridge. I was out like a light. I didn't want to tell him that I'd been ignoring him when he came in. Better if he thought I'd been asleep. I won't keep you up. You need your rest to heal. His smile was so filled with sympathy I didn't know how to respond. And he looked so sad somehow. He headed back to bed before I could work out what to say. It's not like I was going to get much more sleep. Maybe we could both use the company. And he could help me decide what to do tomorrow. Time to find out if he'd really do anything for me, like Carol said. I swallowed. Would you please sit by me for a little bit, till I calm down properly? I just want to get some of the horrible pictures out of my head. The police come to take my statement tomorrow and I can't stop thinking about all the things I have to say. I held my breath as he returned to my side. I exhaled slowly, hoping he didn't notice. Can you tell me about them? Maybe that'll help them go away faster. I stared at him. He meant it. He seriously wanted to hear about the horrible things I'd been through. Didn't he realize how graphic my memories were? They'd give him nightmares. Nathan, I don't even want to think about them. Talking about my nightmares will only bring them back, I told him gently. This was a horror movie he didn't want to see. No, it won't. He sounded like he was trying to convince himself he wanted to hear it. That's what all the psychologists and counselors say. You wait. They'll tell you it's good to get it out, and your heart will feel lighter. Lightening my heart to burden his? Not likely. Nathan, I began, wanting to ask about his nightmares. Did he dream of me or his sister? Both of us? He looked like he was ready to cry and I could feel tears on my own cheeks. I sucked in a breath as I held out my arms, offering him a hug. The least comfort I could give him. I can't, Nathan, not yet. I can't tell you all the horrors that happened, you already have enough to deal with. His arms tightened around me, as if he were desperately seeking some sort of solace. I wish I had some to offer him, but I was the wrong person for that. I could only offer darkness. 24. I'm Detective McGinnis. We need a statement from you, Miss Lockyer. The detective was an older man who looked sympathetic and understanding. He hadn't trusted this to any underling, he wanted to be the one who asked me questions. I understand this will be upsetting for you, but we need your assistance to catch the people who did this to you. I nodded, thinking, don't you dare leave. Somehow during the night I decided I needed Nathan. I reached for Nathan's hand, but I couldn't feel a damn thing through the bandages today. I looked down, carefully placing my fingers between Nathan's as I held his hand. I could feel a faint pressure as his fingers curled around mine. I looked up and found Detective McGinnis' eyes on our linked hands. He cleared his throat and looked at Nathan. Mr. Miller, I'll have to ask you to leave or at least step outside. No. Nathan stood up, but I wasn't letting go of his hand. I could feel the pain in my fingers as he tugged on them, but I gritted my teeth and looked away, determined not to let go. What do I do? Let him go. Tell this detective everything? No, no, no. I'm sorry. You won't give a statement yet? Detective McGinnis said suddenly. Oh shit. I must have said it aloud and not realized. I hesitated a second before I looked at the detective. I'll make a statement now, but I want Nathan to stay. Detective McGinnis looked at me with pity in his eyes, before he turned his gaze to Nathan, and his expression hardened. Mr. Miller is a suspect in this matter and we would prefer that your statement is made privately, so you feel safe and don't hold back information. Your statement will remain confidential. He wanted to take Nathan away from me before I could defend myself. I didn't trust him. I'd hold back anything I damn well liked. Did he seriously think I was stupid enough to let a man who'd hurt me get anywhere near me? I wasn't telling him a damn thing. I realized I wasn't ready to give up Nathan. I glared at the detective and weighed my words carefully. Officer, I'll never feel safe until I know every one of those bastards can't touch me again. And I'll never feel safe alone with a police officer after one of them shot at me. He winced at this and glanced down at my legs before meeting my eyes again. His gaze was steady. Nathan. I started to say. The detective jerked his head, his eyes narrowing as they fixed on Nathan. I bet he thought Nathan had threatened me with something, and he wouldn't back down until he got Nathan out of the room. He'd push us until Nathan left and he had me alone. What if he tried to hurt me and Nathan didn't come back? Hadn't I been through enough already? As I felt tears build, hopelessness set in. My voice squeaked a little as the tears started to flow. Nathan shouldn't be a suspect in this. He didn't. He's about the only person who hasn't hurt me. I reached for a tissue automatically with my free hand. Nathan, please help me out here, I thought desperately, releasing his hand to reach for a tissue with the other bandaged hand too. Relieved, I watched Nathan pull out some tissues for me. Now show him you're my caregiver when I'm helpless, not the violent, threatening bastard he thinks you are, I begged Nathan with my eyes. Please. For the second time in as many days, Nathan helped me to wipe the tears off my face and blow my nose. His expression held only concern. I glanced at the detective. His eyes were on Nathan and he looked thoughtful. I made my voice quiet and sad. I can't use my hands and I can barely stand, let alone walk. I feel so helpless. One of these pillows would probably be an effective weapon against me. As the detective looked back at me, I tried to smile, but I just didn't feel it. I know I need to make a statement so you can catch the people who did this to me, no matter how upset talking about it will make me feel. I'll do it, however many tears it takes, but please don't make me do this alone. Alone. I don't want to be alone. As the tears came to my eyes again, I looked from the detective to Nathan, begging both of them for help. To my surprise, the first voice I heard was Nathan's. If you want me to stay, I'll be here for you. He sat down carefully on the bed beside me, taking my hand. Detective McGinnis just looked at us, not saying anything. I tried again. I don't know how long it will take before I'm strong enough to tell this story without someone to support me. I don't even know if I can. I want you to catch them and I want to help you do it. I want to know they can't touch me and that I'll be safe as soon as possible. Please, let me use the little courage I have left before it's gone to tell this story now. I don't know when I'll be brave enough to attempt it again. Slowly. I forced myself to look down at my lap, hugging my arms to my chest. An arm snaked around my shoulder and I let out a little gasp of surprise, before I relaxed at the sound of Nathan's voice in my ear. I promised I won't let them hurt you again. They won't touch you, you'll be safe. 3 times. That's 3 times today Nathan had come to my rescue, 2 more than I'd counted on. If he cared about my well-being so much, I didn't want to give him up yet. I heard Detective McGinnis clear his throat, and I held my breath. I think that if you'd like to make your statement with him present, under the circumstances, you can do so. Provided, of course, that Mr. Miller doesn't interrupt or interfere in any way. I breathed a sigh of relief. Thank you. Then I proceeded to tell him. Nothing. 25. Dark my Chris kiss sorry bastard. Mike's laughter died away as Chris lay like a dead weight on top of me. Maybe he's dead, I thought, hoping. I squirmed, trying to push him off. Get off me. Shush. He held my wrists with one hand and pressed the other over my mouth. No such luck. He didn't do anything else though, for a long moment. My tears trickled into my hair. He hadn't hurt me yet, and I was crying already. I sniffled, wishing I could wipe the tears away. He turned his face toward me at the sound. He shifted again, up and off me, backing away until he hit the door. Closed, of course. He knocked over the torch as he slid down the door to slump to the floor. He lifted his head to look at me, clapping both hands to his mouth as if he were going to be sick. I heard him say, "Oh God, I'm so sorry," in a desperate rush. I sat up, hugging my knees to my chest. My tears still flowed freely. I wiped my nose on my sleeve. Why? I whispered. I couldn't stop shaking. They'll hurt my family if I don't do what I'm told, he said in a dead voice. If you don't hurt me? I asked, a little louder. Yes. And I can't do it. He buried his face in his hands again. I'll say you're a brutal, callous, raping bastard if anyone asks me, I offered. I meant it too. Shakily he replied, thanks. 26. I'll go get the laptop now, I'll be an hour tops. Will you be okay for that long without me? Nathan asked, looking worried. I shrugged and summoned a small smile, despite secretly wondering if he thought my sheets would turn sentient and strangle me in his absence. I'll be fine. Carol came in. Time for physio, she sang out. Your doctor pulled some strings and persuaded one of our best physiotherapists to take you on, though she barely had space for any more new patients. Nathan stopped dead. The laptop can wait. I ignored him. Which one? I asked Carol. Her smile widened. Althea. I heard she asked for a very personal favor from the doctor as payment though. And he turned up this morning looking like he hadn't slept, so we're all wondering just how personal it got last night. Her laughter was wicked. I didn't believe it. But he's married. I objected. She shrugged. You ask her. Maybe she'll tell you. Nathan, I said suddenly. You go get that laptop. It'll be okay. He shook his head. What if she hurts you? I tried to smile, but I think all I managed was a sick grimace. She's a physio. She's supposed to hurt me a little in order to help me get better. It's probably best that you're not here for that. After the session, all I'll want to do is rest, which I can do if I'm telling you what happened so you can write it down. He bit his lip. Are you sure? I forced myself to nod. Then I'll be as quick as I can, he replied, hurrying out of the room. I felt a twinge of fear, but I brushed it away. Nathan wouldn't have left me unguarded. Don't you get sick of having him here constantly? Carol asked. I shook my head. I like him. When he's here, I feel safe. That's a lot for me. Her eyes filled with tears. I wish you didn't need it, but it's good he's so devoted to you. You have no idea. You must be Caitlin. I didn't recognize the musical voice that spoke the words, nor the tall African woman who entered the room. I nodded. Carol smiled. I'll leave you two for your session. She left quickly. You must be Althea, I replied. She laughed. I am indeed. My husband said you needed the very best of care, but because of the trauma you've been through, you wouldn't trust a physio you hadn't met. So he asked me to take care of you and I promised I would. Your husband? I asked, mystified. Your doctor, she replied with a smile. We haven't told many people at work. He wants to keep his personal life separate. Something about how he was engaged to marry another girl, and she left him. He said everyone looked at him with such pity he couldn't stand it, and he didn't want to jinx us. So it's a secret few people know. You were there the day he proposed, so I thought you knew. I drew a blank and it embarrassed me. I'm really sorry, but I don't remember ever meeting you before. Her laughter was deep and infectious. I wanted to hear it again. We were trapped in a lift together once. You fainted in the heat. I'm not surprised you don't remember it. He didn't propose until after he made sure you were okay. His patients always come first, even before me. She nodded fiercely, evidently proud of her husband. Now, tell me about your injuries so I can help you like I promised. My hands she dismissed until later, when I no longer needed the bandages. My legs were another matter, and the subject of much poking, prodding and manipulation, before she started giving me exercises to help strengthen my muscles. "How often should I do them?" I asked eagerly. "At least once a day if you can," she replied. I met her eyes. "You know the men who did this are still hunting me, right? I need to recover as fast as I can. I need to be able to defend myself. I have all the time in the world while I'm stuck in bed. How often can I do them without doing myself further damage?" She must have seen my determination. "You can do a set or two every hour, but make sure you take breaks in between and stop if it hurts. You don't need to push yourself that hard." "I do. It'll hurt far more if they get their hands on me again. I won't let that happen." She smiled sadly. "Good luck with that, honey. You take care, and I'll see you for another session in a few days." As soon as she'd left, I started my exercises again. I couldn't get my strength back fast enough. 27. Nathan placed a pastel pink laptop by my lunch tray. I looked at him, wondering how he'd come to choose a pink computer. I hadn't thought he was gay, but who knew? Maybe the sleazy manner was an act to hide where his tastes really lay. He saw me looking from the laptop to him and he started to explain, "It's my sister's old laptop. She doesn't need it anymore. You can borrow this as long as you need to, so you can record what you remember." I nodded, trying to steel myself. I could have said I lost my nerve, as he took an inordinately long time setting up the laptop, plugging it in, turning it on and waiting for it to boot up. I could have said the sheer trauma and pain had made my memories hazy, and I experienced some sort of amnesia. But I didn't. I can't repeat what I said, because what started as an effort to remember became an exercise in forgetting. I'd start telling Nathan about one memory, then realize that the memory was too painful to focus on, or, with increasing frequency, too graphic for me to burden Nathan with. I used vague words and half-finished sentences to describe the very clear nightmares in my head. Every time I returned to that Word document to add to the record of my memories, I shuddered at the memory of that first session, when I had to describe the PG version of the horrors aloud to Nathan. He typed it all in, his expression holding pity, sadness, desperation and furious resolve, as my memories subjected me to the R-rated version that could never be censored in my head. What would Nathan do if I told him the uncensored version in all its detail? I wondered every time I remembered his reaction to the little I told him that day. I lost track of time, but I kept going until the horrible memories wouldn't go away, with my eyes open or closed. I tried to shut them out, but even that failed. Nathan wrapped his arms around me in an attempt at comfort. Instead, it felt like a reminder of help, which, when it came, was too little, too late. His pity only made it worse. I pushed away from him and lay down on the crisp white sheets, not looking at him because I knew if I apologized for my rudeness, I'd cry again. When Nathan suggested he leave for a bit, I panicked. The thought of being alone with my memories was terrifying. Especially if his alone time brought him to the realization that he couldn't handle this anymore. I need him to come back. He must have seen it mirrored in my eyes, our mutual desire to escape from my memories. He was already up and poised for flight. After a slight hesitation, he invited me to the coffee shop downstairs for cake. I felt wrung out like a dishcloth that had been used on one too many dirty pots. Yet even the thought of caffeine and sugar had me sitting up again, seriously considering his half-hearted offer. I opened my mouth to accept, but he pulled his shirt over his head. Oh! Beneath his loose-fitting shirt, Nathan had been hiding more than just his injuries. I wondered how many hours he spent in the gym to maintain those muscles. Looking at his biceps, I could see how he managed to lift me so effortlessly. The dressing was gone from his shoulder, but an angry patch of red remained. What I'd thought to be a mortal injury had only been a bad graze. There'd only been a lot of blood because of the amount of skin scraped off by the bullet as it sped past him. Damage he sustained while trying to help me, I reminded myself. It could have killed him, and then I'd have been here, alone and helpless, and I felt a sob rise in my throat and choked it down. Nathan must have heard me, for he turned toward me, looking concerned as he touched my arm lightly. He extended his other hand toward me too, the shirt still hanging from his fingers. Chris offering me his sweater to cover my nakedness. Kindness in the dark. The memory came without warning, and I curled up in horror, trying to fight the dark dream in my head. The day they took my clothes. I mumbled some reply to Nathan's worried question about my well-being, struggling to stay out of the memory. I bit back a scream. I was so preoccupied I never heard him leave the room. Before I realized it, I was alone with Judith holding the sort of hospital uniform the surgeons wore, a grumpy look on her face. It dawned on me slowly that I wasn't going to wear my backless nightgown in public, something I hadn't thought about. I was relieved before I'd had a chance to worry. Judith's grumpy because she didn't like Nathan, I realized as she started speaking, her hissed whisper trying hard not to be heard. He never leaves. The whole time you were unconscious, he barely left the room. He just kept talking to you. It didn't stop him trying to chat up the nurses though, sleazy bastard. He sat in the chair by your bed and wouldn't leave, even when I was changing your dressings. She slid my hospital gown down and pulled the surgeon's top over my head. My voice was muffled by the dark blue cotton. Really? Why? Did he say? What did he do to make her dislike him so much? He said he'd promised you something and he wasn't letting you out of his sight. She snorted as she helped me pull on the pants. She evidently didn't believe it. Wow. He really did keep his promise. I still owed him for a lot. Then I should thank him when he gets back. My voice was fainter than I wanted it to be. No. She was vehement. She picked up my hairbrush and set to work on my hair. Don't trust him. The way he looked at you. When I changed your dressings, the way he just stared at you, without any emotion at all. He didn't look angry or upset or even interested, like he cared that you'd been hurt. It wasn't normal. She cleared her throat. We've all been really hoping you'd recover with all you've been through. All the staff on the ward, I mean, and in the ed. We don't want your boyfriend making life difficult for you when you've been through enough. Her expression held dire consequences for Nathan. I was at a loss for words. Hadn't I already noticed that Nathan's treatment of me was far more clinical than the brand of charm he used on the nurses? Of course his behavior would seem strange if they thought he was my boyfriend. He does care that I've been hurt. It's complicated. I tried to be honest, which also meant incredibly vague. If you don't want him here, all you have to do is say, and he'll be thrown out of the hospital. He won't be allowed back in. She smacked the brush down hard on the bedside table. She looked and sounded like she'd like to do something similar to Nathan. I was touched that the hospital staff would be so kind to me, especially as I still flinched when they actually, physically touched me. He's only here because I want him to be, I told her carefully. If I didn't want him here, I'm sure he'd go home without you all needing to go that far. I paused, registering her disappointment at not getting to evict Nathan. But it's wonderful to know that if I needed help, you'd do that for me. Thank you. We both saw Nathan coming up the corridor and she left the room quickly, not saying another word, though she definitely looked daggers at him. 28. Nathan looked hesitant as he came back in, but he didn't back out. He took me downstairs and made sure I was seated at a table in the coffee shop, before asking what sort of coffee I liked. Rather than betray my limited knowledge of coffee, I asked him for a cappuccino. I could count on one hand the times I'd asked someone else to make me a coffee. To me, coffee meant whatever instant blend was available, mixed with enough sugar and milk to help me choke the bitter brew down. He didn't ask me about cake, and I wondered if he'd forgotten about it. Or was he one of those domineering men who ordered for you because he felt girls were too helpless to make their own decisions? I was betting on the first option. I looked around. The cafe was perhaps a third full. I wasn't the only patient there, though I was probably the only patient who wasn't wearing pajamas. There were a few people in the same scrubs I wore, but their name badges identified them as staff who were supposed to wear them. I couldn't suppress a sigh and looked away. I'll get there, I told myself. I'll go back to uni and one day I'll get there. All I have to do is recover so I can. I closed my eyes and listened to the music over the speakers. It was an old song, something cheerful. I tried to remember the words, but the sound of the coffee machine hissing drowned out the music. I looked over at the counter. It was Nathan's turn. He ordered and paid for something, then came and sat across from me, empty-handed and smiling nervously. They'll make the coffee and bring them out together. So what kind of cake did you get? I asked brightly. He looked rueful. I don't know. Puzzled, I opened my mouth to ask a question that began with how. He cut me off. I didn't know what you wanted, so I got a bit of everything. There wasn't much to choose from. He looked apologetic. Right on cue, a waitress came with a fully loaded tray and started putting plates down on our table. Some kind of cheesecake, something that looked like an overgrown chocolate brownie, some sort of tart that was covered in strawberries, and 2 frothy cups of coffee. Decaf cappuccino? She asked, waving the hot drink dangerously close to me. Mine, Nathan said quietly, indicating the space on the table in front of him. Decaf? He didn't want any caffeine? Odd, I thought, avoiding looking at the diabetic coma waiting to happen, spread across the remainder of the table. I looked down at the coffee the waitress set in front of me, trying to work out how best to drink it. Maybe if I turned it this way I could get both hands around it. If I was careful I might be able to do it, but I'd get froth on my face. Nathan unwrapped a straw and stuck it in my coffee. I looked at him. He just smiled and picked up a cake fork. So which one would you like first? I reached for the plate with the strawberries at the same time as he did. I expected a fight, but he held the edge of the plate with one hand and sliced a bite off the cake with the other. My heart sank. I couldn't handle a cake fork yet. Nathan hadn't missed my expression. He held the fork out to me, cake first. Like that first bite of egg, I took it. Is it good? He asked, taking the fork to the cake again. Yeah, I admitted, my mouth full. I tried to cover it with a bandaged hand. He popped the next bite in his own mouth. You're right, he agreed. He set the fork on the table, the tines resting on the edge of his saucer. Picking up a clean fork, he loaded up another bite. More? He asked with a smile. He waited until my mouth was full before he asked. So when you were sitting here with your eyes closed and your mouth open, what were you thinking about? He was watching me, I realized. I waited until I'd swallowed before I spoke again. The music playing on the radio, I told him. He looked surprised for a moment, then sat, listening. I did too. The song had changed, now it was some perky boy band, and the song involved frequent use of the word beautiful. My memory stirred faintly. It had been a long time since I'd heard any music. Something called One Direction? Nathan asked me if I knew the song, a kind smile on his face. This isn't my style of music, and you're not going to stereotype me that easily, I thought furiously. No, I lied smoothly. His teeth ticking against the tines, Nathan swallowed another bite of cake. So what sort of music do you like? Mine, I thought but didn't say. I liked the music that came into my head and felt so great when I got to play it, but it had been a long time since I've heard any music and it'd be a while before I could play again, but I would. I tried to gather my drifting thoughts. I like Powderfinger, I offered. He smiled. Me too. Baby, I've got you on my mind. I froze at what sounded like a bad pickup line, staring at him. His eyes widened as he realized what he'd said. That's my favorite one of their songs. Baby, I've got you on my mind. What's your favorite? Burn Your Name, I said immediately. Because it's the most fun to perform. He looked confused. I'm not sure I know that one. I replied without thinking, it was one of the last ones they released. The one that goes. I sang the first few lines before I realized that people were starting to stare at me. I clamped my mouth shut. Oh hell. The pain medication must be messing with my head. I just started singing in a cafe full of people. Even Nathan stared at me. You sing really well, he managed to say. Thanks, I replied as politely as I could. Your turn. What music do you like? My favorite band at the moment is Evanescence. He sounded hesitant. They're good but very dark, I replied, closing my eyes. I think if I was dying, I would want the last song I heard to be one of theirs. If I were to commit suicide, I would definitely be playing one of their albums. I opened my eyes to find Nathan staring at me again, more worried than ever. What did I say? I thought a moment. Oh shit. Pain drugs were definitely messing with my head and my inhibitions. But I wouldn't say they're my favorite, I finished lamely. He grabbed my hands and held them on the table, looking into my eyes with a fierce intensity. Why would you say that? He blurted out, his eyes wide with horror. I tried to sound dismissive. I studied music at school and there was a section on music in soundtracks. We had to assign songs to specific scripts. My group got some action movie where the hero sacrifices himself at the end, and we picked an Evanescence song for the death scene. I shrugged. The teacher didn't like ours much. The group that got the best mark picked Bohemian Rhapsody. He looked confused again. They picked what? It was my turn to stare. Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody. You have to know it, it's a classic. I'm going to have to sing this one too, I thought. At least this one was quieter. I took a deep breath and tried to be as quiet as possible. It only took a few lines before comprehension dawned on his face, but his eyes were still wide after I stopped singing. He seemed unable to think of a single thing to say. To buy himself time, he lowered his fork toward the cake plate in front of him. He'd eaten the last bite of cake, without realizing it. I watched him try to cut another bite with his fork, but it only scraped the empty plate. He looked down in surprise. Do you think we have time for another round before the staff upstairs realize I've kidnapped you and decide to report you missing? He had a cheerful smile on his face, his eyes already straying to the cafe counter. Did he realize what he'd said? That he was responsible for my injuries? I felt the fury build. If it's true, I'm going to kill you, but first, I'm going to kick you under the table so hard. I drew my foot back under my chair, ready to deliver a kick that would help him hit the high notes of any song, even Bohemian Rhapsody. He looked back at me, still smiling as he waited for an answer to his question. It took a moment before it registered in his head what he'd said. His expression slid from smiling back to horrified, and he closed his eyes in mortification. Oh God, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to, he babbled. It was a fucking pickup line. He'd fallen for me. He'd fallen for me so hard that when he turned on the charm, he managed to forget what I looked like now and what happened to me. I could feel the laughter bubbling up inside me, as I broke into a grin and carefully placed my feet flat on the floor. He opened his eyes again and he was absolutely transfixed. He seemed unable to stop staring at me, a battered girl with so many bandages I had to wear surgical scrubs instead of real clothes. Mr. Sleazy roommate, in love with a well-wrapped mummy. I lost it laughing. It felt so good after so long. Even my face felt lighter. I realized that the hospital staff a few tables over were staring at me too, looking concerned. I managed to get control of myself eventually, but Nathan didn't take his eyes off me. I looked down at my lap, willing the hospital staff to leave me alone. I'm fine, he just made a funny joke. I kept my voice as low as I could. I told him I'd had enough cake for now and I wanted to go back to my hospital room. I heard his voice talking too fast for me to understand half of it as we went back upstairs. It sounded like he was just letting off pure nervous energy. To think he charmed the nurses as easily as breathing. As he was about to help me back into bed, he paused to take a deep breath and close his eyes before he touched me. His hands were as careful and decorous as ever, not even lingering as I half expected him to. Mr. Sleazy roommate, the perfect gentleman. I could feel the smile lifting my lips, now light as air. Nathan was looking at me, a question in his eyes. What did he ask me? Oh, if I wanted more cake. Yet his eyes were offering far more than cake. Everything. Longing that I'd accept his offer of himself. I smiled at him. Two could play at this game, and I was holding all the cards. I could have been answering either question. Perhaps Nathan, I told him, still smiling. But not before tomorrow. He opened his mouth as if he wanted to ask which question I was answering, but he couldn't say the words. I tried to sound rueful. I'll be sick if I have any more cake today. My eyes dared him to ask me the other question, the one that wasn't about cake. He smiled uncertainly. Me too, he said nervously. I'll bet, my queasy roommate. 29. Dark Mike Simon knife fighting police. I woke in the dark, not sure why. There was no light, just rapid breathing. Not mine either. Help me. Get me out of here, I said, hoping it was Chris. No response. I held my breath, waiting. The rapid breathing didn't change. If anything, it grew faster and louder. I couldn't see him, only hear his panting. Are you going to hurt me? I demanded. I reached into my pocket for the card, going straight for the knife. I felt the bump as his scraping steps hit the side of the mattress. He gasped in surprise. Too close. Are you going to hurt me? I shouted, scrambling up. Something brushed against my chest before fingers grasped at my breast. I slashed forward with my knife and met resistance. What the fuck? She's free and she has a knife, an unfamiliar voice wailed. She stabbed me. My son's a police officer, I'll have her arrested for attempted murder. Behind him the door flew open, dim light framing a bulky shadow. 30. Cancellation in theater. I blinked and focused on the woman hovering above me. Her name badge told me her name was Claire and she was a CN, if the theater uniform hadn't told me that already. They've moved your skin graft up to this morning, Claire the clinical nurse told me, pressing her lips together. I nodded and she left. Time to heal some of the scars. This meant I'd be allowed to leave hospital soon, if my skin had healed enough to start using it for grafts on the bits that hadn't. I both heard and smelled breakfast approaching. Hunger wasn't hard to ignore, especially if I could have breakfast vicariously through Nathan. I looked over at him, hoping he'd chosen bacon and eggs. I won't have any, he told the lady from catering. Why not? I asked, disappointed. I don't want to throw up on the operating theater floor, he replied. But he didn't need surgery, just me. You mean you're coming in with me? I blurted out. It still didn't make sense. I knew he'd been a med student too, and he wouldn't have lasted past first year if he threw up at the sight of blood, like Jason did. Nathan looked shifty. They'll put you under. Unconscious on an operating table, alone. Fuck. I'd forgotten grafts are done under a general anesthetic. Nathan's warm hand on my wrist brought me back to the present. I'll be there. I'll scrub up and watch over you as you sleep until your eyes open in recovery. He sounded like a perverted stalker. I told him so. He laughed and I joined in, but there was no humor in mine. I knew he heard it. You're going to be fine. I'll make sure of it. He didn't know how relieved he made me feel. Nor would he if I could help it. 44. First tied fingers broken cut rings Tom. Right, where's the little bitch? A new voice startled me. Someone's silhouette stood in the open doorway. Groggy from sleep, I rolled out of the blankets. As I'd slept, Chris had taken his sweater back. Beneath the blanket, I wore a t-shirt. Chilly, I tried to think fast. I heard no one's had you yet and I get to be first. I didn't know the man, nor his voice. Scared of what the new man meant, I flew at the shape, biting, kicking, punching and scratching. Deja vu. Half my face ignited and I flew partway across the room to land heavily on the floor, the result of another blow I hadn't seen. A warm trickle on my cheek told me he'd cut me. With what? Rings? I tasted blood and a sudden pain in my chest told me at least one of my ribs was broken. I struggled to get up, but the pain of each breath I took slowed me down. His body crushed mine against the concrete before I could get to my feet. I reached behind me, nails out, in the hope of doing some damage. I raked them down what felt like his arm before he pinned both of my arms behind my back. He roped my wrists together and tied them tightly. There'd be no freeing myself this time. The Swiss card had stayed in the pocket of my jeans, stolen by Chris and Mike, along with the rest of my clothes. I think you drew blood that time, little bitch, he said angrily. Fuck you, I replied. I tucked my fingers into fists, so only the middle ones stuck up. Up yours, you prick. He snorted. I screamed as he methodically broke both upright fingers. His rings dug into my flesh. In a haze of pain, I didn't resist as he got up off me and turned me onto my back. It was too dark for me to see his face, so I spat, "Who the fuck do you think you are?" He took out a knife, holding it up so it caught the little light and glinted. It was bigger than the one I'd held, that Mike took from me. The only knife I'd seen bigger than this was my chef's knife at home. Or the ones in the necropsy labs at university. Maybe. I smothered a sob. I had to keep fighting. Show no fear. You can call me Chris, he said, carelessly slicing the sides and shoulders of my borrowed t-shirt so it fell away from me. The blade was sharp, nicking my skin in several places, but he didn't seem to notice in the dark. Or maybe he did and he'd meant to hurt me. Now I wore nothing but fear and a few spots of blood. Oh God, please, no. He stood back and looked at me for a few seconds, unzipping his jeans. He took a step closer. One more, you prick. One more step, and he took it. I kicked out at him with both feet together, but he moved and grabbed my legs, forcing them back down to the floor, spread wide apart. If you think you're going to... I began angrily. Fuck you, little bitch. He grunted, lowering himself to the floor between my legs. That was the fucking beginning. I won't let him live to see the end. 45. After a lot of persuasion, Nathan managed to talk me into going shopping with him. I'd intended to use Dad's credit card details to do my grocery shopping online and make them deliver it all for me, but he reminded me that I had no cash, no phone, no wallet and no idea what the newspapers had invented about me overnight. Some things don't get delivered. He swore he'd help me with everything, so I reluctantly agreed. It felt strange going out in public, after so long in captivity, in the dark and in hospital. At least I didn't have to do it alone. So I'd feel like a right invalid. He got me a wheelchair. Despite all my piano practice, my fingers still felt clumsy as I pushed the damn thing. I resolved to play for an extra hour when I got home. The new song, the one that wouldn't leave my head. I focused so completely on the song that I almost crashed my wheelchair into someone's shopping trolley. She glared at me as I mumbled an apology, but her expression quickly changed to shock, and she hurried away. She wasn't the only one to wear that expression. I felt like everyone was staring at me. Had they all seen my photo in the paper? Every shop we went to, it seemed they had. Everyone looked at me for a second longer than they normally would, giving me pained, sympathetic smiles as they nodded to me as if they knew me. "Do you need anything?" I asked Nathan, wondering. He didn't seem to be the type of bloke who'd volunteer to go shopping for no reason. "Something to sleep in," he said quickly. He made a big show of buying himself boxer shorts and t-shirts in Maya, asking my opinion of an expensive satin pair and some cheap cotton ones. I looked at them both and wondered how he'd look in the deep blue satin, six-pack and all, but I tried to control my face. "Weren't you going to buy pajamas?" I asked innocently. To hide his panic, he picked the first pair he saw, a pink pair parked haphazardly on the rack marked 50% off already reduced items. I couldn't help it. I laughed so loud I couldn't stop. "Can I help you?" the shop assistant asked as she hurried over. "He needs some new pajamas." "Probably not in pink," I said, pointing. Nathan's cheeks flushed to match the pajamas as he put them back. "We don't have much left after Father's Day, but the best ones are over here," she said, leading the way over to a rack that looked a bit more his style. "What do you normally wear?" "Long sleeve short buttons, long pants, shorts." I heard Nathan mumble something about how he normally just slept in his shorts or nothing at all. I'd seen him mostly in his shorts and a t-shirt in hospital, so I already knew he'd dressed up for me. I hadn't realized he'd dressed for me. It was the shop assistant's turn to blush as she managed to say, "I'll just be over at the counter if you need any help. Just let me know, okay?" She beat a hasty retreat. Nathan quickly picked something with long pants and long sleeves, before pushing me up to the counter with his proposed purchases. I'd never seen a shop assistant process a payment so fast, and say so little while doing it too. "Time for food shopping?" Nathan asked, breaking into my thoughts. I agreed, so we headed for Woolworths. As we wove through the crowded shopping center, dodging trolleys and kamikaze pram pushers, a thought struck me. He'd wrapped himself in the sheets when he'd shared my bed in hospital. Maybe the conservative sleepwear was part of his bid to be allowed to sleep with me. I led the way to the frozen food section, where the pre-prepared food was kept. The less time I spent cooking, the more time I'd have for exercises and recovery. The display of strawberry punnets broke my resolve though, it had been so long since I'd had fresh ones. I stuck some in the trolley, on top of everything else, and kept my eyes on them as Nathan pushed our soon-to-be purchases toward the till. "Anything else you need?" I murmured, looking at the newspaper rack by the register. "Coffee," he replied. "I have some already, look." I pointed at the big jar of instant coffee hidden beneath a frozen pizza. "No, I don't drink that stuff." "I'll get my own," he said vaguely, hurrying off to do so. I wondered what sort of coffee he'd come back with. If he was really so fussy, he must have wanted that expensive stuff that had to be brewed or needed specialist equipment to make. To my complete shock, he returned with a jar of decaffeinated instant coffee. "What?" he asked, catching sight of my expression. He tossed the jar into the trolley. "Nothing," I replied, wincing as the jar landed on one of my precious punnets. "Not on the strawberries." He apologized and moved it, but it was too late, the damage was done. He'd squashed part of one punnet. Annoyed, I led the way to the register. I wanted to go home. He reached for the newspaper before I could, laying it carefully on the conveyor belt at the checkout. Actually, he'd grabbed two, but he seemed happy to pay for them, so I didn't argue. As we waited for the girl at the checkout to finish scanning our purchases, I caught Nathan glancing from the newspapers to me, a bemused smile on his face. It wasn't a bad photo of me, though it was a terrible one of him. You couldn't even see his face. I scanned the article, which didn't tell me anything I didn't know. Apparently, I'd been found near death, on a beach early one morning by a mystery man. A reward was offered for an exclusive interview with the man, I read, as I turned to page 7 for the rest of the article, but Nathan hadn't seen it yet. I wondered if he'd take them up on it, or if there were some confidentiality conditions inherent in his job that said he couldn't give press interviews. More importantly, looking at the offered reward, I wondered what they'd offer for an interview with me. Perhaps I should check my email and Facebook messages. Nathan's expression turned dreamy, and I wondered what he was thinking about. From the way he looked at the paper, I suspected it was me. I smothered a smile and decided to cause a little trouble. I had to call his name a couple of times to get his attention before I asked, "Will you stay with me tonight?" "Sure," he replied promptly. Thinking of the pajamas, I waited until we were in the car park with no one in earshot, before I said what I was thinking. "I want you to sleep with me." His eyes positively shone for a second, before he realized I couldn't be serious about sex with him. But for that second he'd hoped. Feeling perhaps a tiny bit penitent, I explained that I wanted him to stay with me like he had in hospital, or like this morning. Instantly, he agreed. As he lifted me into the car, I felt for a moment that he lingered to savor the feel of me in his arms. The thought that coalesced in my mind was that if I did choose to get naked with Nathan, he'd never hurt me. For he knew I'd kill him if he did. Maybe one day, but not yet. "Should we pick up a pizza on the way home?" It took me a moment to understand what he'd said, but once I had, I agreed. He handed me his phone, as my brand new one was still in the box, and told me to order whatever I wanted for both of us. I had to search for the number, but I found it and ordered for us. While Nathan focused on driving, I flipped idly through his phone. He had a text message he hadn't read. I accidentally hit the touch screen in the wrong place, and it sent me to his list of messages. The unread one was about his latest phone bill being ready to pay. I moved my fingers to send the phone back to its home screen when the first line of another message caught my eye. "Maintain cover. Bill Trust." The number had no name associated with it. I glanced at Nathan, but he was busy swearing at some Land Cruiser that had just cut him off. I opened the message so I could read the rest. There was a whole conversation preceding it. I scrolled down to the first message in the chain. It had been sent from Nathan's phone, presumably by him. It dated back to the 3rd of July, the day before I was kidnapped. Made contact. Will attempt to obtain information. The reply. Stay with contact. Establish trust. Cooperate. Use any means necessary. And condoms. Nathan's next message was dated the 4th of July. The complete lack of punctuation emphasized the urgency of the text. Drugged saw kidnapping trapped in car, girl taken, must break cover, need backup now. The last and most recent message was the one I'd seen initially. I read the message in full, dread sinking in my stomach. Maintain cover. Build trust. Do anything they ask until further notice. Will contact. I poked blindly at the touchscreen, trying to exit out of Nathan's messages as if I'd never read them. When I saw the home screen again, my nerveless hands dropped the phone in my lap. Someone had ordered him not to help me, to let me be taken. I needed to get into ASIO and find out who. There was no way in hell that was legal or procedure. I closed my eyes and added one more bastard to my list. A nameless bastard for the moment, but not for long, I vowed.